Okay.
What's up, everybody? We're live. Hello to everyone here. Thank you guys for being here. First thing we're going to start off with is what are we all drinking? Chris, what are you drinking?
Dude, I'm sticking to Coke, man. I drank way too much on vacation. Like, can't do it anymore.
You quitter.
CODESTRAP, man of the hour. What are you drinking tonight?
I am doing this nice single barrel select Jack Daniels. I love my Tennessee whiskey, so
Nice.
my favorite. It's actually been kind of hard to find lately. Been having to go over to Bevmo to get it. They usually have it in the supermarket, but it's been a little tricky to track down. So I think I bought 2 bottles last time at the supermarket getting this stuff. But yeah, I love my Tennessee whiskey, and I got some like Pacifico chasers over here.
Nice.
Okay. I love it. So obviously it's been a while since Code's been on the pod, probably like a month, maybe 2 months now. So happy you're back. You've still been obviously posting content, Palantir and
Yep.
Coffee. Great little Saturday morning thing you started.
Yep.
Lots has happened since you were last on. Obviously, we had a whole earnings. Here's what we're gonna do. Here's the first question I want to start it off with. Chris knows the question. You don't know the question, CODESTRAP.
Okay.
The question is, what are your raw and honest thoughts? Just like when you gave your raw, honest thoughts about Snowflake, even though you're a little drunk, what were your raw and honest thoughts about Chris liquidating his position in Palantir?
It didn't bother me at all, man. I always look at that as like a personal decision. Like your investment decisions are deeply personal decision, and I was like, yeah. I mean, and also like I'm always doing these. I'm always reanalyzing my thesis on Palantir, and it's almost like a battlefield, right? Like things change, the situation's fluid, So you always got to be looking at new information, and there's a really good case to be made that companies like Snowflake and Databricks are going to outcompete Palantir. So there was a really good argument on that front, and it wasn't there a year ago. And the rate of change has picked up so much. Like if you actually look at how many people are onboarding into Snowflake's marketplace, the new features they're adding to look a lot like Foundry. Same thing with Databricks. Databricks is trying to incorporate more low to no code tools in their platform and their own marketplace for data apps. Like the competition's kind of figuring out the strategy, and they're zeroing in on what they need to do to win. And Microsoft as well. So I think you've constantly got to be analyzing these things, evaluating your position, all that kind of stuff. So for me, it seemed pretty logical, like what he was doing. But for me, I really can't comment on what I'm doing personally, but I would just say nothing's changed for me. Like I still believe in the company. I love.
I was gonna say, how did you feel after earnings? Did any part of your thesis get weakened, or your thought?
I mean, man, like I couldn't say anything that hasn't been said already. Like if you go out and you watch the videos, I think every possible thing I could say has been said. I mean, for me, like I was really disappointed because it's never a good look when you have the CEO pounding the table and appearing angry at questions, and I just felt that can do like really irreparable harm, to a publicly traded company when you have that kind of a thing going on. Karp is not Steve Jobs. Okay, like Steve Jobs was hated, but he was also loved. It's like I don't know if he can get away with that shit. But it just wasn't a good look. I didn't like it. I thought it was a really poor look for the company. They really have to be careful not to do permanent damage to their brand doing stuff like that. So yeah, I think the community summed it up pretty well. It's just when you are a CEO and a good CEO, you believe you're fucking right. Like I've told you that before, where a good CEO will drive the car off the cliff because they believe they're right. And I think that's where Karp's at. He has a strategy. He knows he's right, and he's not going to back down from that position. And he's certainly going to confront questions he thinks is stupid, or things where he's like, "Look, man, I've thought about every angle you're on here. We're way past this." So yeah, I mean, he's doing what he believes is right, and he's being a good leader. Man, you better be right. No points for second place, motherfucker. Better be right.
Yeah, and it really does come down to that, right? Where
Yep.
depending on, yes, you need a leader who's very like focused in on their strategy, but then there's other leaders out there also that are willing to adopt different strategies depending on how the market is changing. So anytime you look at companies, anytime you look at different markets, you have to be fluid with it. And that's one of my thesis breakers is the rigidity of Alex Karp and, you know, some of the Palantir management not trying to adopt some of the other stuff that's going on within the industry. So it really goes, and I've been burned in the past because of that, where I kind of like played into, okay, yes, the CEO's got a great vision, and you know, I think it was, who was it, Edison, that said vision without execution is just hallucination. And that's the key right there, that yes, I see Alex Karp's vision, and I totally agree with it, that we should definitely have the Western world be the primary source of dominance in the future, because we have a lot of great things that we implement that a lot of like the other side is very, you know, is not. You don't want to live under a totalitarian society. So yeah, I fundamentally agree with everything that Alex Karp says, but remember, you're still running a business, so you have to figure out a way to kind of like have the yin and the yang. You can't just have one and then forget the other. So yeah, I think Alex Karp right now, he has the ability to attract a lot of talented engineers.
Yep.
The problem is you need to attract customers right now.
Yep.
That's the key, you know, and I don't know if he's the guy to attract those customers. When you compare him to something like, I don't want to keep saying Frank Slootman, but Frank Slootman, it's way different business model. And like, there's so many things that you can have a CEO when they're like, Frank Slootman does not come from a software engineering background, right? Like a lot of people think that that's the thing, but one of the things that he understands is what the market wants and the market desires, and he gives it to them. And he's got this customer is always right mentality that makes adopting Snowflake very easy for a lot of CEOs.
Worked out well for Andy Jassy. Yeah.
Yep, him too. And yep.
Yeah.
Code, I wanna touch on this topic for a bit. If you can give us a high level overview, you did some videos on this. I know there's a lot of deeper stuff to go into, but after the earnings, a lot of what Chris was bringing up on the podcast, partly influenced by you, was Databricks as a major competitor to Palantir, or as someone that's a private company, not IPO'd yet. Last valuation was like 30 something billion. So if they do IPO, you'd assume it's like 40, 50 billion, which would be way more than Palantir right now.
Yep.
Can you give us some of your thoughts on Databricks versus Palantir? Do you think Palantir has a fundamentally differentiated technology? Do you think Databricks is catching up? How do you kind of see that?
I definitely think they're differentiated. They have a, like in the videos I've done, I've explained there's this like intersection where the technologies overlap, but Palantir is ultimately, you know, with Foundry going after a completely different business model and sort of platform. And they really are setting themselves up to be like an operating system for the future of SaaS, whereas like Databricks is just now starting to figure that out. But they are very, like, if you just even look at who started Databricks versus who started Palantir, you're going to see very different profiles, like deeply technical on one side, like all engineering focused on one side. The other side is like a combination of technical skills and artistic vision. And they're just going after different markets. So like Databricks is very much too, by the way, like you're not using that platform unless you're an engineer. Like there is no role for you to play unless you are a deeply talented, effective engineer. And you can, you know, and I don't even believe if you're a data analyst, you're going to be using Databricks really. Like it's too technical for the average data analyst to be on there and being productive. Whereas Foundry, there's a role for every single person in your organization to play, everyone. And so that's fundamentally a whole different kind of a thing at the end of the day. And with Foundry, I really do believe their strategy long-term is to be this like type of operating system where all SaaS products that we use today get rewritten as these data applications that run on top of the data warehouse, which is Foundry's implementation. And that is going to be like the operating system of the future. And I've written a lot, or I've, you know, put out a lot of videos about that, but that is what Foundry is built for. Whereas Databricks is more of a tool to solve data engineering problems and to solve machine learning problems. Its use cases are specifically for engineers and scientists. Foundry is an enterprise tool for everyone in your enterprise. And there is overlap in there in that they both, you can do data engineering on both, you can do machine learning on both, but Foundry kind of takes it to the next level, you know. And they're way ahead. But that said, this is where market forces are really dynamic, and Databricks could see where Palantir has an edge over their offerings, and they're starting to pick up on this idea of data applications. It's no coincidence that both Databricks and Snowflake launched marketplaces for data applications. Yeah, they're limited today. They don't do a whole lot of stuff. They're not like Skywise. They're not like HyperAuto, but they're trying to get there. And when they do, that's going to be a major problem for them, you know?
Yeah, and their existing relationships with counterparties is going to play right into their
Huge.
hands because
Yeah.
they're going to just literally say, hey, Palantir will come in and say, hey, we can do X, Y, and Z. Even if they have an inferior product, because they have a pre-existing relationship, they'll adopt it more easily,
Exactly.
you know.
There's no,
And
like, I mean, you don't have to go through that whole process of procurement, you know. It's like what do you all you have to do is up your budget for the next year on the spend. That's easy, you know. And like procurement with Palantir is hard, dude. It's not easy. So
the one good thing about Palantir is that they've got a lot of experience on creating applications for end users because of their a lot of the work that they did with Gotham. Like, so let me explain something that not too many people know, but a lot of people in the military, especially end users, they don't hire the most like technical people. Okay, like you really have to like I don't want to say dumb down like the end user, but basically you have to dumb down a lot of things for people at especially at the grunt level to utilize things. So Palantir's figure out ways to get grunts to use Palantir, especially their Gotham platform, pretty effectively, right? Based on what we've seen already. So the thing is, they do have the ability to build things. The problem is that scalability, right? Where they've had to work so many years in that government space where they've gotten used to constantly sending forward deployed engineers and tailoring things that they think that that should be the industry
part
standard
of
that,
their
hey,
it's
we,
absolutely part of their culture
yeah.
now, you know.
So now, how do you get away from that? How do you get away from, hey, I have this problem. Oh, let me send a forward deployed engineer. No, how about you teach me how to solve my problem? And so that this way I don't have to call you next year to do it. Well, then Palantir is probably like, well, wait a second, I'm going to lose out on revenue because every time I send a FDE to your site, I'm getting a certain contractual fixed amount of money. So if you
Getting a
look at
lot of
even
money.
how, yeah,
Getting a
so
lot of money, more than the license
so
fee probably.
yeah.
So
So it's like things like that that really hold Palantir back. But also one good thing is that I would say, and this is something like I think Coach Up you've brought before, the success rate of Palantir's Foundry platform has probably provided way more business value than what probably Snowflake has brought to a lot of corporations. They just don't know it yet. Like I've seen a lot of companies buy into like, salespeople say, oh, we'll digitally transform everything. And at the end of the day, the business value that you just
yeah.
literally have people just stringing CFOs along and saying, oh, we're doing this and we're doing that and we
Oh
have
yeah.
this
That's
efficiency versus
yep.
Palantir, who probably is coming up with tangible benefits that
Oh,
end up
absolutely.
impacting your bottom line. The problem
Yep.
is that giant hurdle that it takes to adopt Palantir in terms of
It's
cost.
huge. Yeah. Yeah.
Every CFO probably loses their shit. Like, wait a second, what? You want me to
But that's
buy?
all
You want me to? Yeah.
self-imposed, by the way. Like it's not there's no technical reason that they're doing that. It's self-imposed. So I think it's a combination of like how they started. Like I don't know if you saw that clip I put out from Barry on Seattle Data Guys channel, where he was explaining like it's some kind of innovator's dilemma where they're just used to that way of operating. Like that's kind of like why I said it's like part of their culture, the way they operate with government is that they're used to this way of operating where you do an upfront sales and you go sit down with a customer and you're spending millions of dollars. And that's how they've made a lot of that's how they've developed a lot of their innovative ideas and stuff. And it's just kind of like the way they operate, right? But that doesn't scale, you know. You can't scale a software company that way, bro. Like that's solutions, right? So like
Coach,
every
can they fix this problem?
oh, absolutely. I mean, you can fix it tomorrow. Like I said, there's nothing technically stopping them from having a mass market strategy. I'm in a multi-tenant Foundry instance. They can spin multi-tenant Foundry instances up all day long. Literally nothing stopping them other than, I believe it's probably Alex Karp. Like I think that if you listen, did you see that interview that came out recently on Jackson's channel where he was like talking about privacy with the NHS deal and
The FT interview.
yeah. And he had someone actually asked an interesting question in that interview, which was what happens when you're gone, Alex? Like, how do you keep continuing to make sure your platform isn't misused and you respect privacy and all this? But it really shows what a integral part of client selection Alex Karp is.
Yeah.
Now, how do you get a CEO to stop doing that? You tell
Well,
me,
I,
because I'd like to know.
my guesstimate is that there are some serious discussions happening at the board level with, especially with someone like Teal, who's probably like at this point talking to
He's not
Carp.
on the board anymore.
Who? Peter Thiel's not on the board?
That's what I heard. Yeah, I don't think he's part of the board anymore.
Let me check. No, that would have been big news if Peter Thiel's.
No, I heard he's not on the board anymore. At least that's what was. I forget where I read
Isn't he
that.
the executive chairman? Hold on. Let me
I thought he wasn't on the board anymore, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well,
he's on the board. He's still on the
Is
board.
he? All right.
Yeah. So my thing is, some of the stuff that I've seen lately is that they are starting to eat a little bit of humble pie. Not a lot, but a little bit in putting out a lot of the videos that they have, even with like these small partnerships that they had, like this one that originally I was kind of like a little bit critical on it, like the one that the partnership that they had with this I forgot what they're
Digital
called.
collectibles, Beckett.
Yeah, the digital collectibles thing. But then at the same time, but yeah, I didn't realize it until like really I sat down and I really tried to analyze. I'm like, you know what? They're highlighting every little bit because now they understand every little bit counts. It's not just, oh yeah, we work with the biggest corporations and if you can't, dude, I don't think Beckett has that much revenue. So how much are they paying Palantir? You know, they're not a big like customer that normally you would have thought that, oh my God, like, you know, they can afford.
Maybe they can't do Foundry for Builders though. I don't know what program they're under. You know, it could be Foundry for Builders.
Yes. Yep. So I do. Yeah, I the other thing is also like the hiring that they're doing in terms of like sales folks. I think they're hiring industry veterans. From what I can tell, is they have a culture that's very young. Like a lot of people are very like they're software engineering based. I think at one point Alex Karp, he was having an interview with somebody and he said, "Are you guys still the same way where you hate salespeople?" Because actually Alex Karp used to actually make fun of salespeople and hated salespeople, right? And so that culture
used to? I don't know about used to. It still kind of does, right? Like, I've seen that pretty recently.
Yeah, but so I see that now that they are starting to hire some industry veterans from the SaaS space, and I'm sure that every single one of those industry veterans is saying the same exact thing, saying, "Look, we can't sell a product that's not scalable. So at the end of the day, thank you for the performance bonuses that you're going to give me, right? But every consultant that you hire, whether it be McKinsey or Boston Consulting, they're going to tell you the same thing. You need to figure out a way to scale. That's it. That's the $1 million question, and that's the $1 million answer. You know, figure out how to scale." So
it's not even a question of figuring out how to scale, though. They know how to do it. I think it's that whole point of Carp wanting to vet each customer, you know, and to like decide, is this use case one we want to pursue, and having that as a cultural value. Whereas like someone like an Andy Jassy would say, hey, we can do that and we can scale. The way we're going to do that is we're going to have a terms of service, and anyone who violates it or not, anyone we don't want on our platform, we'll just kick them off. You know, like that's what a terms of service is for.
Don't you think Palantir can't just do a TOS because, like he said in the same interview, we're the first ones that decided to not build a Muslim database. Like the tech is too powerful to just.
That's a government job, dude. I'm talking about commercial, bro.
Okay.
Companies don't have guns and they don't have fucking police forces, and they're not going to go out and like imprison you. So like that's a whole different set of arguments.
Right.
And I totally get why you want to vet the use case on the government side. I'm all for that. On the commercial side, though, it's just kind of weird. Like, bro, there's an industry standard solution. It's called terms of service. You don't even need to violate them. You just get to kick people off because they write those things to be completely, you know, amorphous. They can mean whatever you want them to mean at the time, you know. So that's how you maintain control over a platform. Typically, is you just write terms of service. You onboard people through, you know, automation. You still have control. It's not like the CEO can't be involved if there's a violation and people want to like make a case to the CEO as to why someone should be kicked off. But you can't be an upfront barrier. And so part of this just gets down to like understanding the role that Karp wants to play there, whether or not he's willing to let commercial scale on its own without him. It's almost like it's his baby, you know? He doesn't want to let go of his baby.
I say separate it. Just call commercial.
I'm like 100% in agreement. You know who needs to run commercial is Sean.
Yeah.
Sean would crush commercial. He's the Andy Jassy in waiting over there, dude. Like he would take commercial and turn that thing into a beast, you know?
Yeah.
Like here's a good thing to think about with Palantir. I think about this all the time. How long would it take Palantir if they doubled their commercial customers every year to get to the same customer count as Snowflake?
Snowflake has like 4,000, so
yeah,
about 3-4 years.
Yeah, that's fucking nuts, right?
More than
well,
that.
they only have how many customers? They have 200.
They
double
like
every year. I know I'm asking you to do math, Amit, but
That's it more. That's like 8. That's like 8
Yeah.
years.
You
No.
son of a bitch. For those who don't
I'm like
get this, I
4.
think I had to add like 150 plus 10,
Right,
like a podcast from 3 months ago, and I do
It's
that
gonna take him a long. It's
150.
gonna take a long
This is-
fucking time.
Amit is the proud product of the Rutgers University system. I just want to let y'all
200,
know.
You know what's the most
400,
ironic thing?
800, 1600, 3200, right? So like,
My mom is a math teacher, bro. That's how
all
bad.
right, but it's gonna take them a long time. We're talking years, and that's assuming
Yeah.
Snowflake and Databricks just stop growing too, right? So like, that should scare everyone. That should be like, what the fuck? Like, why are you guys growing so slowly? That's nuts.
Okay,
and that
so-
assumes
so-
100% year-over-year customer growth in commercial. Yeah.
Agreed. So in this case, it is kind of scary that it would take them multiple years to get to that customer count of like a Snowflake.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we have, which leads into the super chat, CODESTRAP can't probably talk on this because of conflicts of interest, but Chris can. The price of the stock is incredibly low. And even though it'll take them a long time to grow at this level at $7 to get a 3x on your money, right? Call it $21, $23, I think is very reasonable, even if they're not growing like crazy. So Chris, what are your thoughts on Gabe's super chat? The price that you think is the absolute rock bottom that you think is ridiculous for Palantir?
Well, I mean, based on my estimations, if they're trading below cash value and they're still generating cash flow, they're fine. Like right now, we're pretty much close to a bottoming, in my opinion, based on just purely valuation. But that doesn't take into account a further slowdown in commercial growth and other growth, right? So I do think that there is room for Palantir to expand its growth, its total growth, like revenue growth, probably towards the end of the year, because I do think that eventually some government contracts are finally going to start to materialize and pay for them. Also, there is something that Kevin O'Leary said, which is kind of interesting, which was how Palantir has been kind of like sidelined a little bit because of like who's in charge of the government right now, right? So everyone knows the midterms at this point, the Republicans are going to come in and shellac the crap out of the Democrats. Just the unpopularity of a lot of the stuff that's going on. You know, if Republicans come back into power and you see Peter Thiel being so politically, politically active in supporting some of the candidates that are out there right now, if they end up getting into power, then of course they're going to be advocating from the Hill for Palantir in terms of government spending. So that government spending might end up boosting revenues in the future. And I think that could be a nice driver for Palantir. But here's the thing. The valuation would have to be more like a defense contractor, not a SaaS, like a hyper growth SaaS company. So if you take that into consideration, $15 to $20 billion is probably a fair valuation on Palantir. But here's the thing. If you're trying to, that would mean that there is no room for Palantir to become like the next like Salesforce. It's all about execution at this point. So I think right now, if they don't execute, they're gonna be like a niche player, right? And if you look at most of the niche software players, right, they're not exactly like you look at Leidos, right? Leidos is one of the largest government contractors out there. They're not that big, and they have so much revenue that's already coming in. So I would say that their valuation has to be measured. I think a lot of people, they think that I want to give Palantir the benefit of the doubt and give them like a hyper growth SaaS valuation, but I can't. And based on I can't, that's the other thing. And the other thing is their compensation model is heavily tied to issuing shares, which is kind of a double-edged sword in that kind of like helps you save cash and that lets you be free cash flow positive very easily. But at the same time, you're kind of diluting shareholders, right? No matter how much you say, oh, well, you know, dilution doesn't matter. Dilution does matter. Look at your share count, right? At $10 when it IPO'd versus $10 right now, look at the market cap, right? So as those share counts expand out, that means that further growth in the share price is going to be much harder, right? So if your price target is one day, this is going to be a $200 stock and there's 2 billion shares outstanding, that would make Palantir a $400 billion market cap company, which is really hard to get to because on top of it, they've been issuing so many shares. So I think right now we're at a point where Palantir is fairly valued, but are they going to execute? If they do execute and they do well and they start to, re-energize their growth a little bit, then yeah, we could definitely see Palantir start to move higher, in a short-term way. But I do think right now they have a lot of execution risks, which is why a lot of analysts are not valuing Palantir nearly as high as they were previously, right? So at $20, if they were still growing at 50-60% per year, dude, they should easily be worth $20, but they're not. I'm sorry, they're not. So what are you going to do? They're missing their own targets. They're missing their own targets.
Let's talk a little bit about like what that okay, so I always say like markets will make you pay, right? So like the free market, the great thing about the free market is like it's a really good judge of like whether you're right or you're wrong. And if you're wrong, the market is going to make you fucking pay, right? So like it's a really good indicator of whether something's working out or not. But it's still never a check on the CEO, right? Because like the CEO can do whatever they want to do, regardless, And if they believe they're right, they're gonna do what they think is right, regardless of even what the market is telling you is wrong, right? So what's the out for Palantir? It's a bit like thinking about the Ukraine war, right? And Putin. Like, what's the off ramp for Putin, right? Like, how does he get out of that war? It's the same thing for Carp. Like, what's the off ramp for Carp? How does the CEO who's at war with the market get an off ramp? And I'm like, dude, the off ramp is simple. Split the fucking company up, have Sham run commercial. You stay face and run government. Can keep saying all the things you've been saying. Keep operating that company the way you've been operating it. You're focused on government. There's a whole lot of philosophical debate to be had there. You'll love it, Carp. But over here is commercial, and Sham's going to run that like fucking Andy Jassy in AWS. That's the off ramp, right? Because the CEO is
why
not
can't they
going
do
to
that
say
without splitting the company? Why can't
because the CEO's never going to say he's fucking wrong. He has no other out. What's the out going to be? I quit? You think Carp's going to fucking quit? No, because you can't replace him. He's not replaceable, right?
Yeah, and Palantir is worse because you have those F-class shares.
That's
At
what
least,
I'm talking about. Is the F-class shares make him? You cannot replace Carp.
But why can't Carp just be like, Sham, you're head of commercial, even though I'm still the CEO, and like they push.
Have you seen the corporate structure between like AWS and Amazon?
Yeah, so Amazon's the parent company, and then they have other small companies.
Exactly. And they separate everything and get your own staff, your own, everything's completely separated.
Yeah.
So
you have your own accounting, your own CFO, your own salespeople. Yeah. And
it would actually stop. It would stop with this bullshit that they have to encounter every time they go to a fucking conference about like, oh, you're a spy company. Oh, you're this or you're that. Like, that's not us, man. This is Palantir commercial. Like, we have nothing to do with that.
Dude, that is one of those things that's the other really big problem for Palantir. It's that terrible PR that they've had for the last 5 to 10 years. Yeah. That haunts them. Like no matter where they go, even right now with the NHS, right? The NHS is evaluating them, and dude, there's already hit pieces out there.
Oh,
right?
It's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, they're just flat out lies. People
there's a whole protest funded by Foxglove
to I use Foundry, right? Like I know the compute model, I know how it runs, I know all the security control. I don't know all the security controls. I know some of the security controls around it, but like Foundry 101, we don't sell data. Like we don't fucking monetize your data. We are a data processing layer. That's it.
Yeah, but good luck telling that to all the liberal, like a lot of the liberal media sources out there that literally, the minute you talk about Palantir, it's always just Palantir, Peter Thiel, Donald Trump, fascist, done. Yeah. Like, and that's it. Yeah. And they don't look beyond that.
I can hear the Karens now. That's pretty funny. It's like there's this prototypical like pitch and tone of like a person who talks like that and criticizes Palantir, and I always just hear it in my head, and it's always this Karen on the other end. It's like, it's just so funny. It's like having a fucking nervous breakdown, So it's like,
yeah, but you know what the unfortunate reality is? So many people in Silicon Valley buy into that. They buy.
No,
into
what's
that,
funny is these fucking people are walking around with their iPhone and their fucking Android phone. Like, how many FISA warrants has Palantir had? Yeah, fucking 0. You know why?
Yeah.
Because they don't have your data. How many FISA warrants does Apple and Google get? Shit tons. You're worried about privacy. You're walking around with your fucking iPhone and Android. Like, how stupid are you?
Dude, it's an automated process. It's literally, no matter what you do, boom, approve. That's it. I mean, it's just a rubber stamp.
It just shows complete ignorance. These people are like completely ignorant. And what's hilarious about it is it's such misinformation.
Yeah.
Is that like Palantir literally wrote the book on data privacy and protection. Like Courtney Bowman contributed this book called The Architecture of Privacy, which is the architecture that is in Foundry, right? Foundry is an implementation of this architecture. And that's what Karp is talking about when he's talking about like the software, like our protections are provable. They're mathematically provable. They are 100% provable. No other system out there can do that for you, you know? And like Palantir literally wrote the book on that. And these journalists, if they had half a brain, would actually start going out there and like going, what's different about the way Palantir approaches security than say Google or Apple or Facebook or whoever? There's an actual really cool article to be written about. There's probably a series of articles that be written about that. Like Palantir feels so strongly about this, they left the valley, you know. And this all ties into work that like Jonathan Haidt's been doing about how social media is like completely fucking with young girls and destroying their psychology. And like, there's a lot going on out there that if an investigative journalist was worth their salt, they could actually write an amazing piece about, you know, how Palantir has differentiated itself in this area. Yet they're under scrutiny from these fucking idiots, these morons who have no idea about any of this stuff. They have zero knowledge. It's just all complete. Like, I don't know, the only thing I compare it to is like pitchforks and torches, man. Like that is the level of thinking that's at play here. It's pitchforks and torches.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the only way to get around these people is to placate them by having something that's even at a cosmetic level, by saying commercial is separate from you know, the other part of it. Even though
exactly.
it's even if it's just purely cosmetic, it would literally solve half of their issues with PR.
It would solve a ton of them, you know. And like Sham is a great visionary on the commercial side. Like when I listen to him speak, I really get that he understands where he wants, like what Foundry could be, you know, what the potential is. Yes, I'm sure he aligns with Karp on a lot of the things that they talk about in terms of philosophy and like how the platform can be misused. But I think Sean would be much better at building a scalable way to implement those controls and being more open to it, you know. Whereas Karp wants to be deeply involved. You know, Karp is a philosopher. He is, I mean, he is like, if you think of Karp, he just stumbled into being a CEO. At the end of the day, he is a philosopher, which means, like on some level, philosophers. You guys all know Plato was, right? Philosopher King, right? You guys know about the Philosopher King and all that crap. So on some level, like philosophers were the first like socialist managerial class, you know, like we're the experts. We're going to run things. We know how to run things. No, you fucking don't. You don't know how to run shit. You know how to go in there with your high-minded ideas and break things, but you don't know how to run anything. You know, so like on some level, there's this dilemma they have where, you know, your CEO is trying to inject himself into things. I think that like you can't just scale a business around. This can't be a philosophy experiment, you know. It just can't be. Like at the end of the day, the technology is so powerful, yeah, but in a commercial use, not really. You know why? Because fucking these companies don't have guns. They don't have police. They don't have the arguments are irrelevant at the end of the day. The same arguments you're using about like needing to, you know, be involved in every step and control the growth of this thing, make sure it doesn't get in the wrong hands. Like, who the fuck cares if Wonder Bread has Foundry? Like, I don't fucking care at the end of the day. Facebook's in possession of oodles more like things that could do potential harm to people than anything you will ever sell to a fucking corporate company. Like, these arguments are relevant. You're inserting yourself in things in a self-inflated sense of importance that just doesn't exist, you know.
So CODESTRAP, I do have one quick question, and I think this centers around the Google partnership with Palantir. So one of the things that we've seen is Snowflake, even though it's cloud vendor agnostic, and they majority of their stuff is running on AWS, right? Databricks, even though they're everywhere, majority of their stuff is Azure. Where's Google in all of this? Because at the end of the day, Google is left without a dancing partner. And recently we saw, what's his name, Korean, get into a video with Shyam Sankar. That could be huge potential. But what do you think about that?
So I think that Shyam has the right vision for Foundry, which is like, we're going to be the next AWS, but he doesn't mean AWS. He doesn't mean like we're going to go out and build an infrastructure company. It's like, we're going to be the software layer abstraction over all those infrastructure companies, and building strong partnerships with those companies is absolutely essential to making that vision successful. Why? Well, I think the first one is like what doesn't exist today that they could bring about is like real competition between the cloud providers, right? So like real competition, meaning I can instantly move a workload over here or over here. right? Like instantly, not like a year's worth of migration work. And after I rewrite all the code and I spend gazillions of dollars on engineers and everything else. And I mean, like tomorrow I could flip a switch and move you over. That's going to take some real partnerships with these providers, you know? And I think that if you build those, what's great is your customers are going to get tremendous benefit, and the cloud providers are probably going to win too, because like workloads that are optimal for their platform will actually get run on their platform. And today that doesn't happen because there's a restriction of like I can't just move my software over. And Palantir solves that problem, you know, with Apollo and with Foundry. And so by Sean partnering with all these, or I mean, I don't know if it's him partnering with them, but those partnerships are extremely valuable so that you don't create an adversarial relationship with these people. Like, let me give you a worst case scenario example of what could happen to Palantir because it doesn't run its own infrastructure. Let's just say, hypothetical, you know, your political scenario, the Republicans win and Peter Thiel's out there fucking cheerleading. I don't know what a scenario is, right? But like, and there's all this backlash, right? And like the blue check marks on Twitter are pissed, and then like, you know, fucking you know, Andy Jassy running AWS and now running Amazon, maybe Bezos, you know, calls him in the middle of the night, like, get fucking Palantir off our platform. I don't want this company on our platform anymore. What happens to Palantir tomorrow? Like, just out of curiosity, can you guys imagine?
If Jassy says, hey, Palantir can't be using AWS.
Yeah.
Nothing. They just go with another cloud provider. They have
Nothing, motherfucker. Yo, but like, no, everyone who's running fucking Palantir on AWS is gone tomorrow as a client. You are fucked, motherfucker.
Oh yeah.
Like that's what those partnerships are all about. Like, you better make sure that you have a strong relationship with these cloud providers that, you know, yes, we're going to be competing and workloads may go from one to the other, but we're going to make sure everyone gets rich along the way, you know?
Yeah.
But what I want to point out is that Palantir is absolutely beholden to those cloud providers. They don't run their own fucking cloud. You know, 90% of the software that's running out there is still running in the cloud now. You know, yeah, there are on-prem data centers, but those are either, you know, regulatory requirements or kind of legacy holdovers with ERP. If a cloud provider tells you you can't run on our platform, your business is effectively dead.
It's like Truth Social that's not available in Android App Store.
Yeah,
Google is not running.
funny side note on that. I've been having to dive into all the new Android policies at my work because there's a lot of like things they're requiring, and that whole like the whole content moderation and user monitoring like thing that is keeping them off is real for everyone. Like, everyone is struggling with that right now. We are struggling with that right now. So like, I don't want people to think that they were singled out like in that scenario. Like, that's just something that Google is enforcing on everyone, and everyone's having to adapt their software to be compliant with that set of things they've put out. I don't want to get too into it, but you can read the App Store policies for Google and you can see like what they're requiring. But dude, it's a huge problem for us too right now, you know? But just show you the power of these platforms, right? Like, so anyway, the whole point with that debate and that discussion is like, Palantir is absolutely beholden to these people, and they need to make sure that everyone is getting rich under whatever it is they're going to do. And Sham's the right guy for that, in my opinion. Like, Sham's the guy that can get in there and build those relationships, find the way that everyone's going to be happy, and also make their customers happy, shifting workloads to the places they'll run best. You know? So, in my opinion, and Sham's the kind of guy like you couldn't help but get along with, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Who would you rather hang out with for one night, Karp or Sham? You know, like, I would want to hang out with
Karp. I'm thinking Karp. But
okay, I would love to get drunk with what's his name, with Sham, but I would love to get high with Karp, dude. I'm not saying I would get high. I don't smoke weed. I do drink a little bit here and there, but dude, I think Sham would be the best battle buddy when you go drinking. Like, he's the dude that would be like, yo, let's go. Shots. And Karp is like the dude that passed you the doobie and then's like, man, I wonder where all these trees came from.
No, he'd be like, man, this company could be 20 times bigger than it is. Right?
Yeah.
Still waiting on that.
He'd be like, fuck Popper. You guys know who Popper is?
No.
He wrote a critique of Hegel and just eviscerated him. You know? So like, yeah, he said to Hegel, he's like, he was one of Hegel's contemporaries, and it's like, look, motherfucker, your philosophy is going to be used to justify the worst forms of government. You know,
Yeah.
it absolutely was. So, but that'd be the kind of shit you get into a conversation with Carp about, and it's like, dude, I don't want to fucking walk away from depressed. Go out with Sham, you're gonna have fun. You know?
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
bro, that's gonna be a good night. You know, I don't wanna
Dude,
sit
Sean
there-
would be the best beer pong partner ever, dude. He'd got your back. He's like, let's go, let's do this.
Absolutely.
Coach Rap, you and I did a podcast a couple months ago, and one of the clips from the podcast was that NATO will be begging for Palantir.
Yep.
How do you feel about the government business right now, Russia, Ukraine? We haven't seen that spike in government revenue since the stuff happened where they said in the earnings that you should see a spike to the upside. Do you think that still happens? And how do you feel?
I don't want to comment on it in the context of like revenue and stock and all that kind of stuff, you know, because I can't. But like in terms of NATO's going to be begging for Palantir, and
you still believe that? You still,
dude, I think we all, the writing's on the wall, guys. Like, war is here and it's going to expand. Like, there's no, Taiwan's going to be invaded, period. Like, end of story.
You believe that? You think that's definite?
Believe it. I don't need to believe it, bro. Like, the writing's on the wall. There's a fucking blockade, you know? So it's over. Like that, and I felt that like over a year ago. Like, China doesn't fuck around, man. You know? Like when they say it's a one China policy, it's a one China policy. You know, like, look at Hong Kong, right? Like, they're not fucking around. We may have a bunch of unserious people that run our country. They do not have unserious people that run their country. So war is here. It's going to expand. To the other, I think today I read that the U.S. military shipped, I think it was like 96 Apache helicopters to Poland, right? So they're now the second largest fleet in the world of like Apache helicopters. Why do you think Poland's doing that? Do you think Poland's feeling all warm and fuzzy right now? You know, do you think fucking NATO members are gonna love Russia on their doorstep? And what about all those freezing people this winter? You know?
Yeah. The other thing is don't conflate commercial spending to government spending. Government spending works in this huge, like, it's this weird thing where they take an unlimited amount of time to pay you. Okay. Yeah. If you've ever worked with a government, they have net like infinity in terms of contract.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's no, like, when you're working with a commercial partner, you have like, oh, you have 30 days to pay us or we cut services. You don't do that with the government. Okay. The government says we pay you when we pay you. Exactly. We'll take all the services up front that you want to give us and we'll eventually pay you. But here's the thing with the government also. You can literally just charge them whatever the hell you want. And if they're desperate enough, they'll pay it. Right. So I do think in that regard, Palantir is going to do very well on the government side in the future. Whether that's Q3, Q4, Q1 of 2023, I don't know when it is, but those revenues are eventually going to hit Palantir's balance sheet. And that's when you will definitely see a spike in Palantir's prices, right? Like in terms of stock and stuff, because that's when, oh my God, they're returning to growth again. Because if you look at the revenue growth that they had from the government side, it was 13% year over year, which is meager. But Arnie Arnaldo, he did a really great breakdown where he actually lined up all the defense contractors and said, okay, year over year, look at how much spending that the government had. And with the exception of Palantir, who grew at 13%, everyone else was down year over year. So that just goes to show you that a lot of this was more on the government not spending money because there have been issues with the spending bills and everything going across. But eventually those revenues will come in, they'll be captured, and they'll be reflected on the balance sheet, in which case you'll see growth again, right? The question is, will commercial keep growing also at the same time and boost up Palantir's growth prospects above that 30%? And I think that's where there is a short-term play in Palantir, in that if you do believe that that government revenue eventually is going to come in, this might not be a bad time to buy some stock. Just saying. I mean, I'm not saying I'm buying. I'm not saying I'm buying. I'm just saying that this might be a good time.
Let me share your tweet. Can you explain this tweet that you said you were going to talk about? So let me read. Palantir starting to get the feeling Alice Carp is finally eating some humble pie. Q3 should be a telling sign of the shift in we don't need you mentality to we're willing to part with you. I'll explain more in this week's pod. A lot of positions for the following.
Yeah, so one of the things that I kind of started to see was them highlighting a lot of their partnerships with just about anybody, right? And also the amount of people that they're hiring from what is that thing called, from deployment strategists, right? Deployment strategists work hand in hand with the parent company, well, the company, whoever they're partnered with, to address their concerns, and then work with their engineers to develop products that can be materialized. So my thing is, they're hiring all these people. That means that their business is essentially growing, right? It's almost like, why are you hiring staff to support a product if the product is not growing, right? That's one of the things that I'm starting to see. The other thing was also all the commercial, like a lot of their content recently, on whether you look at YouTube or whether you look at Twitter, has been more putting themselves out there, right? For some reason, in the last year, they weren't very active in putting themselves out there. Now they're like redoubling their efforts in sales, like actually doing proper commercial sales. So I'm hoping that in Q3, Alex Karp says, "Hey, I'm gonna backtrack. I'm gonna backtrack a little bit, and I'm going to say we'll partner with everyone, whoever comes our way, right?" And like I said, this partnership with this card collectors company, that to me was like, wow. Now they're actually highlighting someone who's really small. They're not just saying we're going for the big fish, and those are the only ones we're concerned about. That's the other thing. My guesstimate is that the contract value of that partnership was not nearly as high as a lot of other contracts that they probably had. They might have had some special pricing on it, but I think right now the other one was the Better.com partnership also. Like Better.com is near broke. Like they're literally laying staff off, and now Palantir's partnered with them. Do you think that they're paying $5 million or $10 million to Palantir per year? No, they're probably not paying half of that. So that just leads me to believe that now Palantir is starting to just, I don't want to say I don't want to say they're fishing at the bottom of the barrel, but they're pretty much there, you know.
Well, in Palantir's defense, like they don't have an open platform, so like just keep in mind that like every failed startup in the world is run on AWS. Like in their defense, like it's not a sign of your technology or how great your platform is that failed companies use it. It's just that they don't have an open platform like AWS where everyone can just ramp and get on board. They're kind of picking and choosing, who gets on, which is a dangerous game anyway. Like most of the startups are going to fail. 90%. So in technology, by the way, 90% of startups fail. 90 fucking percent. Overall, like 75% of startups fail across all industries. This is like a talk I give to senior management. But in technology, 90% of startups fail. Right. So like, I don't think it's a knock against them how successful their customers are. I think it's weird that they pick and choose who's on there.
What I meant by that was they're not necessarily just going based on, oh, we're only going to work with successful companies, right? With large,
Weird, yeah.
I think there was some narrative out there before that says, oh, Palantir only works with the best, who can, who are like large, and that's all they work with. And I'm like, no, that's not what they're doing right now. They're partnering with whoever. They're partnering with anyone and
I
everyone.
disagree. They're not partnering with whoever. They're going through an upfront process, whether they're going through Foundry for Builders with Meredith McNaughton runs Foundry for Builders. She'll be involved in anyone who's going to be onboarded through that platform, and Alex Karp runs Foundry.
Yeah.
And so there is a filtering mechanism, there is a sorting mechanism, but that's a massive bottleneck. When you have two people that essentially determine for your entire commercial business who's brought on the platform. That gets back to culture, that gets back to values. I do want to stick on this war thing for a minute. Like just let's circle back to this, because I think a lot of things we didn't kind of quite cover. So 2 months ago, I was on this podcast drinking white wine. I think I got a little drunk, but I was talking to a Mitt. No one else showed up. And I was talking about how Foundry could be used in Ukraine. This is before we got confirmation that they were actually using their software in Ukraine. And I was like, hey, the best way you can destroy these tanks is you got to know where they're at. Like if you know where the tanks are, you can go out there and you can use kinetic weapons and you can destroy them, and knowing where to put those assets, and also the combination, like as Karp describes, the willingness to fight to the last man, like that's a powerful combination, right? Like I think that the world and our adversaries, especially China right now, have to reconsider, like, do we know have we considered all of the options here? Because if this software is as good as they say it is, and they have satellite constellations that are feeding this information with the US government, like, have we actually calculated the risk here? And what happened? You ever hear that old saying? Like, it's not even an old saying. It's the thing that war breaks out when one side thinks it can win. If both sides think that they will lose, or it's going to be a stalemate, they're not going to go to war. War breaks out when one side thinks it can win, right? So, like, hopefully, on some level, like, Palantir is showing that their software can rebalance things a little bit. You can be an inferior nation militarily, but you can be superior on the intelligence side, knowing where assets are at. And if you're willing to fight to the last man, our software can empower you to use kinetic weapons to go out and do that against the superior force.
So
that's
so
huge, if that's true.
So I'm
going
to share.
Let me finish.
Yeah,
that's why I said NATO would be begging for Palantir software, because that in the hands of every NATO country, especially against the Russian border, the new Russian border that's going to emerge, is that's like the equivalent of arming everyone with nuclear weapons.
Right.
That's why I was saying that, and why they'll be begging for it.
So I'm going to share a video real quick of something. We're going to watch it together. It's from a video game, but it's literally how Palantir operates. And then I'm going to actually key you in to a project that Palantir is already working on with the military, especially the army, that not a lot of people know about. I was going to do a video about it, but
now you're Palantir Bear, so it doesn't matter.
No. Hold on. So let me share this video first, because when CODESTRAP sees it, I'm sure he'll be like, wow, this is exactly what I'm talking about. But give it 1 second. Hold on. Let me just share screen.
That's a great explanation, though, CODESTRAP. That makes a lot more sense for why they would need it.
Okay. So right now, imagine you're in a battlefield, right? Like, one of the biggest things about a battlefield is something where you have literally darkness. You don't know where anything is. You don't know where your units are. You don't know where their units are. Blah blah blah.
By the way,
it's
everybody, Chris is saying this is ex-military. So
yeah. So in the theater of war, there's a ton of darkness all over the place, right? Everyone thinks that, it's really easy to do, but believe it or not, the most effective way to fight a war is to have the greatest command and control center that you can possibly have. So if you know where your guys are and you know where their guys are, dude, you're like 100 steps ahead of the competition, right? This is what Palantir's technology essentially can help the military do. So let's watch the video together, and then we can talk about it.
What's the sit rep on New York?
The Russian jamming rigs have neutralized our air support. As long as they maintain air dominance, it's a losing fight.
We cannot lose New York. Are there any special mission units in the area we can request?
JSOC's got a Delta Force team at Bennett Field. Call sign Metal.
Overlord, Metal 01 is up on Greenside.
This is Sandman. Understand we are OPCON to you. Over.
Glad to have you in our corner, Sandman. The Russians are using electronic countermeasures to jam our comms and guidance systems. The primary emission tower is on top of the stock exchange. I need your team to destroy it. The jammer's full spectrum, so until it's down, you'll have no radio contact. I have ground assets to get you close. Over.
Copy all. We'll get it done.
There's one more video, so just keep watching.
This is Lightning 3-1. Guidance systems are back online. Standing by with a full payload of JDAMs. Requesting clearance.
Lightning 3-1, you are cleared to engage.
Bring in the hard deck. DOT 5 seconds. Weapons away.
Verify initial strikes on the Predator feed.
Sir, appears all sites have been neutralized.
Good work, Sandman. We've regained air dominance over Manhattan and pushed the front line back to the river.
What's our next target?
The Russian command vessel is an Oscar II submarine carrying enough cruise missiles to level the eastern seaboard. We need to strike fast before they can launch a counterattack.
Roger, what's the mission?
Infiltrate the vessel, take over the bridge, then turn their weapons against their own fleet. I need you to link up with the SEALs and get it done. Good luck.
Get up, boys. Where's our infill point? Brooklyn Battery Tunnel.
I thought it collapsed.
It did.
So what we just saw was something that the military salivates over, okay? And that's real-time decision making. There is no, in the military context, there's no such thing as real-time decision making unless like literally it's two guys on the other side describing what's happening and the other guy saying, yeah, go ahead, do that. Right now, this is the kind of technology that Palantir is developing, okay? With their geosats up there in the sky, recognizing where the tanks are, how to plan things out, how to do real-time mission planning, and actually utilizing resources from all over the not just the Army, but actually the Marines, the Navy, the Air Force, because you can see that a lot of that stuff was all combined together, right? So when you think about it, the Army operates independently, the Air Force operates independently, but the mission is essentially the same, right? So you need to have that constant communication all over the place, while also at the same time analyzing everything that the enemy has going on in a specific area, region, strategy, whatever, and then develop plans on how you're going to counteract that. And you need to do it in a timely manner. Every second when you're in the military matters. And so if you can make decisions faster than your enemy can react, dude, that is the biggest arbitrage that you can have. And I suspect that Palantir is doing something of that sort with the Ukrainians, where they're giving the Ukrainians the intelligence necessary from their meta constellation, saying, hey, these are the areas that you need to focus on. These are the areas that you need to kind of back off because they're moving artillery pieces.
They don't need meta constellation for that, but the meta constellation 2, by the way, was specifically designed for enemy submarines and naval activity. Pretty timely for Taiwan, by the way, just so we all know. But like, so these drones that our special forces use, I forget, I think they're called like switchblades or something. They're like, these little man portable drones. They can launch them really quickly. They can actually cover a really large area. And I think that's primarily how they're collecting the data. I don't know if you guys remember that Medium article that came out a long time ago about how blimps were being used in Iraq and were fed through Gotham. All their feeds were fed through Gotham, and all of the data about everything that was going on in the battlefield in conjunction with the blimp data was being fed into a central like a NOC, basically, or not a NOC, a TOC, right? Like Tactical Operations Center. I think that's what a TOC is, right? Am I correct? Right?
Say again?
You believe so. I'm gonna look up
Tactical Operations Center. I think it's called a TOC. Someone, you got military members out there, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just another dumbass civilian, okay? So don't hold it against me. But I think it's a tactical operations center, and they're feeding all this information in. And they had like a really good view based with Gotham of what was happening in real time on the battlefield. Really cool stuff. So yeah, I mean, a lot of people are giving Chris shit right now for like playing a video game thing, but like at the same time, he's just trying to illustrate like in the real world, that's what's happening. You're taking all these intelligence feeds, you're trying to consolidate them, you're trying to give the commanders like somewhere to look at with all this data and make a decision on what to do, right? And in the Ukraine, a lot of that is, let's get these small drone feeds on where the tanks are. Let's get that to my troops who are basically running around trying to avoid artillery fire and not get blown to fucking pieces. Where to go, set up, and destroy these fucking tanks with javelin missiles and other kinetic weapons. Totally valid, right? Now, if you're in the military and you want to contradict any of that, go for it, you know? But like, that's my understanding as another dumbass civilian who's never served and doesn't know anything about this, reading all the articles I can. That's my understanding of what they're doing. But that shit is groundbreaking, guys. Like, that is not something that the enemy can do, right? Like, that's not something Russia can do. That's not something fucking China can do. That's something we as Western countries can do, and it's only powered through systems like Gotham. And I think it's causing recalculations. So like that whole thing when like we were saying before, or I was saying before, like wars break out when enemies miscalculate, you know, it's causing China probably in particular as with this invasion of Taiwan to think like, have we calculated all of the things that could go wrong here? Because if Russia is this bogged down because of a few fucking Javelin missiles and Palantir, where are we going to be with fucking Taiwan? You know?
Yeah.
Real quick, CODESTRAP, if China did invade Taiwan, though, the relationship we have with China as the United States, I mean, that's a whole, from a supply chain perspective, I would assume companies have to leave, right? And then that is the commercial aspect for Palantir. I mean, outside of the governmental use, it would just be insane if that actually did happen.
I think that
Like if they actually invaded Taiwan the way Russia invaded Ukraine, like, and it was it was like objectively it's happening. I mean, the United States' entire relationship with China from an economic perspective changes.
well, yeah, I mean that. I think that's been the thing that people have been sounding the alarm on for a long time, you know. And okay, let me give you a microcosm of this. How many people are going to freeze to death in Europe this winter because of reliance on Russian energy?
Might be
Got
a
a
lot.
number for me? Might be a lot, right? Well, in the United States, no one's going to freeze to death, and we probably won't starve to death. We got a lot of calorie reserves in this country, so like but it's an example of like, yeah, stupid fucking policy leads. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, right? Like, yes, your enemies can hurt you through those economic relations, and if they believe that they're better positioned to weather that storm than you are, they don't fucking care how many of their own people die. You know. Doesn't matter to them. You will suffer. And so at the end of the day, yeah, there is nothing like China's leverage here is that like they're a dictatorial regime. They don't care how many of their own people die. They don't need to win elections. You know, our politicians do. And so America, if war breaks out in Taiwan, most likely thing that's going to happen is America is not going to fight a war with China.
Right.
But they will adopt a similar strategy with Ukraine, which is supplying arms and intelligence. And Palantir will likely be part of that. We know Palantir is part of that in Ukraine right now. And we know it's the major reason that they've been as effective as they have been as a fighting force. And to Chris's point, again, like that whole intelligence gathering thing that he was talking about, like knowing what's happening on the battlefield is like so important. There's like a few people that know how to fight a war. It's not like every fucking commander on the battleground knows how to fight a war. There's like 5 people that know how to fight this war. Like wars are won and lost by how good a tactical person, the person that's responsible for moving men and material around to win a war, the quality of the information they get and their ability to make decisions. Palantir enables that,
Yeah.
So anyway, the point is don't underestimate that intelligence apparatus and how much Palantir is part of that. And if they weren't there, how different the outcome in Ukraine would have been. Now, I can't vet that. Like this is speculative. It's based on what we're hearing from them. It might be a different story if Zelensky were, weigh in on that.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. So the same machine learning algorithms that they use to identify submarines, around the world, right? Is the same things when they uploaded different AI models for different things like tanks, artillery pieces, rocket launchers, missile systems. Those are the kinds of things that end up being able to, that enables you to know exactly where your enemy is and what there are. So one of the really interesting projects that the military, the Army especially, is working on is something called, it was with JADC2, right? Highly recommend you guys look at what JADC2 is, because I put it on my Twitter, and I actually pinned it a while ago, and it just goes to show you how interconnected all the services are and how Palantir is like the backbone to provide those services. So it's not, and that's the real value proposition for Palantir in terms of defense spending, right? Where they're able to take so many different data endpoints, combine them together, and let you have a cohesive strategy on how to defeat your enemy.
Crazy. No, it's crazy. I don't know of any other company that can do that or even has the access within the military to be trusted to do that.
No, I mean, everyone does their own thing right now. Like Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin. Like
Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin. They're trusted to build the kinetic weapons,
right?
And the weapon systems and platforms. They're not trusted. They're not trusted to deliver the software, and there's a good reason for that. I mean, in fact, you uncovered a lot of the reasons that took place in the videos where Palantir was fighting with the U.S. Army and like their own homegrown solution. I think for a long time, like the military thought it could build its own software. Like we don't need you. We can build our own software to do. But like think about that because what is a general's primary responsibility?
Yeah.
Like, what do they sit around and do all day? They're like moving
Yeah.
people. They're
Pieces
moving the
around.
pieces on the test on the board, right? They're moving the
Yeah.
chessboard pieces. Well, like if I was a fucking egotistical general who thought that was my job, I would be like, no way in hell anyone's building the software, but fucking my team. My team's building the
Yeah.
software, motherfucker. That's gonna be my
Yep.
team because that's my win. That's what I'm here to do. And you
The,
can see it by the videos you put out and the research you
mhm.
did that they were very much fighting those kind of battles. It was
Yeah.
not a civil disagreement over areas like where you can measure like this software is better than the other. It was very much an uncivil conversation about like you're fucking with my area over here, dude. You know?
Well, believe it or not, the it was more, and this is where I hate the military sometimes. It all comes down to the almighty dollar, right? So the incentive was, how do you extend out this product so that you can get as much money, like milk the taxpayer as much as you could possibly do it. That's why they give you like a $5 billion bid, and then by the end of the project, it's turned
That
into
was
a
the
$50 billion
process, right?
monstrosity.
Like
Yeah,
Palmer Luckey calls that out a lot. Like the
yeah.
procurement process was broken because like companies weren't coming to you with a working product and saying, "Hey, buy this." They were like, "No, let's just like sign on to this contract where we'll like develop this thing over time and I get baked in a profit margin." You know, so
Mm-hmm.
like the suppliers were incentivized to make it drag on as much as they could, and like
And that's the problem, right? Where you had
yeah,
all these military software companies constantly making products that were, like one of those things where you constantly needed to keep doing more and more and more to it so that they would
yeah.
drag that
But like,
contract
where's the
on.
ego trip for the
Yeah.
general who gets to say like, "Oh, I was part of this 10-year program. I directed it."
Yeah.
It's like that fucking. No, I'm not gonna make a Star Wars parallel, but like, I'm just saying that there is this thing where people who are in charge of all that budget and all that money, their outcomes are directly tied to the success of those programs. They're not disconnected anymore, you know. And so, like for them, it's not like if Palantir comes in and says, "Hey, no, we actually have a functional product. We don't need you involved. Like it works. It just works out of the box." Like that could really piss a lot of people off, you know,
Yeah.
because now
And
they're
most
not
of
the ones
yeah.
responsible for it.
Yeah, and most of them, I hate to say this, have special relationships with defense contractors where they're set up with a nice cushy job after they leave. There's no restrictions on generals leaving the military and then joining the boards of defense contractors.
That happens
So
all the time. Yeah.
that's the other thing too. So a lot of times where, it's almost like you scratch my back when you're in service, and then once you get out, I got your back, and you can join the board. Like an example, like our Secretary of Defense right now, Lloyd Austin, Raytheon. He was on Raytheon's board. You don't think as the defense secretary, we're like, hey, listen, I got a couple of missiles here and there that would be really swell to use, and point. And that's the other thing too. Like when it comes to legislators can bake in wording that can exclude contractors out and bring contractors in. So right now, if you look at Palantir, they need to make sure that they have really good political connections on the Hill. Otherwise, they can literally
They've
have
been doing that though,
legislation.
right? Though they've
Yeah.
been bringing
Yeah.
in all these. I mean, I've been watching the people they're bringing in on the defense side, and
Yep.
they're doing a great. I think they're doing a great job executing on that
Yeah.
front. To be
See,
honest,
see, yeah, but see, the problem, Coach Strap, is I love the government side, but what about commercial? Like,
that's
separate
what I was coming
commercial.
back to. Is like that. This is why you need to separate commercial. Like, think about all
Yeah.
the shit we just talked about. Like, that is a fucking turd sandwich if there ever was one. You know, like having
Yeah.
to deal with all of that. Like, why is that getting? Like, it is getting in the way. Why is it getting in the way? Because it affects your strategy. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
if your strategy is, and we can draw a parallel fucking line here. How Carp is very much on the fence of like, I'm not going to give the software to everyone, but it's like he's operating in the mindset that everything's Gotham. You know, it's not. He's just probably tied up in that. You know, but it is
Yeah.
directly affecting their commercial growth. And honestly, like the best thing they could ever do for this company would do like an AWS kind of split. Like AWS had the bookstore and AWS had Amazon Web Services, and they decided a very early time like it's better to let these two companies evolve separately. I think that's what needs to happen here. And let the government side evolve, because especially as we go into a highly confrontational time, like what is the debate going to look like in America if we're debating war in Taiwan 6 months from now and Palantir's in the middle of that fucking shitstorm, where
Yeah.
America's bound by treaty to go and actually help this country? Do you want your commercial business tied up in that? I don't fucking don't, like I wouldn't want that.
one of the earliest indicators that we are definitely headed into at least a Cold War scenario with China is the Chips Act, right? One of the things that you have to really take into consideration is all the reshoring of jobs that's happening from China. A lot of people diversifying their supply chains out of China, but mostly high tech manufacturing. That should be the canary in the coal mine as to what the US policy is going to look like in the future. And I think that's one of the bets that Pat Gelsinger is making over at Intel, saying TSMC is not going to be able to be an independent company. And literally by, I don't know, I can't say when China's going to invade, because China has a plan. Like they're literally set on it. They probably even have a timetable set. And the minute that the U.S. blinks, they're going to invade, and they're going to say, go ahead, America, do something about it. And TSMC is going to lose access to ASML, all their technology, all that stuff is going to get dropped because of national security reasons. And guess what? You can't have a functioning economy without semiconductor. Look around, everyone in the chat right now, look around your room right now.
The Raptors don't fly without chips. You know, your phone doesn't work without chips. It's a direct national security threat to the United States, you know.
Everyone right now, you have tons of chips just surrounding you right now. All probably majority of them.
Let me ask you this. Yeah. Like if the CHIPS Act was the canary in the coal mine, why did they give like 5 times more money to funding ML and AI research than they did to building foundries in the United States?
Well, that's because they want to maintain that technological lead, right, against the Chinese, right?
I don't know, man, but I agree with you on some level, but at the same time, we have a bunch of idiots running our government, because if they knew, like, it should have been $250 billion went to foundries and 50 million went to ML and AI research, and there shouldn't even been an ML and AI research provision in there at all.
Yeah,
because if you actually look at how much money went into it, like, that is a drop in the fucking bucket of what it's going to take to get foundries spun up here that actually compete with the ones in Taiwan, you know, or the ones that exist already with TSMC. So, like, in my opinion, that was just like, God, like, if they had passed that bill 10 years ago, maybe, you know, and they'd ixnayed the 250 billion on ML and AI research, then yeah. But like, it just really shows how unserious our Congress is about facing this threat, and what that could potentially mean 3 years from now in a prolonged war in Taiwan and in Europe. What we all as Americans could be facing as true hardships, right? Like real hardships. Like, you don't have a job, you're not making enough money, you're fucking homeless, your family's homeless. Like, these are things that happen during war, dude. You know? Yeah. And so I really think people should pay closer attention to what is actually happening in Congress, what are they doing, and holding people accountable for stupid fucking decision making, you know? Yeah. Because the stakes are high. The stakes are super high.
It's kind of,
and you know, understands that as Alex Karp. Alex Karp is really good at this. Like, he understands what's happening there. I love him running the government side, and he's a force for good on the government side. On the commercial side, I think it's a whole different set of concerns, and they're gonna have to find a way to move away from this. Because, like I said, like this controversy is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger as global conflict grows. You know, and Palantir cannot be at the center of this every time that something happens. You know,
I think the West's reluctance to take direct kinetic action in Ukraine is a bad sign, because now that emboldens China. Because now China says, oh, what's the worst they're going to do? They'll probably sanction us. You know, they're sanctioning our supply chains, they're sanctioning this, sanctioning that. But will they get involved kinetically? No, because they didn't do it in Ukraine, so they probably won't do it in China.
Yeah. You know, I mean, arguably, Ukraine is a bigger threat to the post-World War II, you know, Western order than China invading Taiwan. 100%. You know, but I think that that's not just an American failure. That is a failure of all NATO countries. You know, to prevent this problem. But you know, history hasn't been written yet. You know, we're in the middle of this thing. Who knows what's going to happen? We shouldn't presume right now, Poland's not fucking around, and Poland's a NATO member. You know, that military, by the way, is not a joke. Like, go look into their capabilities. They're not a fucking joke. This military can fight. They'll kick the shit out of Russia, given the opportunity.
Data walk. They got data walk. Like, data walk. Just remember, guys.
But that's also dangerous, right? Like, it's also very dangerous to have a highly trained, highly specialized military with the weaponry capable of defeating Russia like with Russia on their doorstep, that's not a good
Yeah.
scenario, for anyone. So, but that's why this whole war in Ukraine is a bigger problem for the West, I think, than what breaks out in Taiwan. I think with Taiwan, it's really a commercial interest that's tied to that country that is driving, and in particular the semiconductor space,
Yeah.
that's really driving the national security threat.
One of the things that benefits us is that China has a weakened economy. If they didn't have a weakened
Yeah.
economy right now,
Well,
I
it's
don't
also what makes
necessarily.
them extremely dangerous, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like we all know that economic collapse is not good when you have a strong military power.
yeah, and especially if you're an authoritarian, because now you're looking for a way to distract your populace from real problems, and the easiest way to do it is by ringing up nationalism, right?
Yeah.
If your
Or
economy's faltering,
scapegoating.
just
Yeah.
go right into nationalism. There you go. Now instead of figuring out why your kids are going hungry, you're like, no, America's the reason because they put sanctions on us because we're trying to unite Taiwan again. That's why
Well,
we're
no,
having all
that
these
I don't
problems.
think that they even need to. China doesn't care about demonizing America. I think China just would. This the saber rattling around a new empire. That would get the population excited, and they've been their one China policy, and
Yeah,
that's why they're pursuing it. I think that with Taiwan in particular, the thing that is particularly scary is what could happen to that region of the world, including Australia, as China projects its influence over all naval operations in that area. If China were to have a lock on that, it could really threaten partnerships with Indonesia, partnerships with Australia. The APAC region would be in complete jeopardy. We have nuclear powers in that region. Like we cannot allow fucking nuclear war to break out. We cannot allow that to happen. And we're at the beginning stages of this now, but like I think that a lot of people have made bad arguments in the past that China does not have expansionist goals that have been
yeah,
proven wrong. Like they're just flat out wrong. Yes, they have expansionist goals. That is a zone of influence they plan to expand over time. And what that could mean to our partners in the APAC is catastrophic. So what's going to happen there is going to be interesting. I think Palantir could what's happened in Ukraine with relation to Palantir should be adjusting the Chinese calculus. Like if they are that good, if their intelligence is that good, and this means a 5-year protracted land war, can we do it? Right?
yeah. I can tell
And
you, with the current military, no, no, we're not ready to fight a war. Like the Army, the Navy, Air Force right now, regardless of how much technological superiority we have, being former military, and I don't know if anyone else is in the military right now, but I can tell you right now, we are not in the greatest of shape in terms of morale. We've got recruiting issues that are like so piss
horrible
poor right now.
recruitment. Yeah, they're talking about
So
reinstituting the draft to account
yeah,
for the fucking lack
it's
of recruitment.
we are
Yeah.
definitely not ready to fight the Chinese in a kinetic war. It's just
No,
not.
hell no.
And
I'm not
this,
saying we're going to get involved in that either. What I'm saying is
Mhm,
America will
yeah,
not get involved. What I'm saying is that the Chinese calculus has to change if what happened in Ukraine is a direct result of A, Palantir supplying the intelligence, and B, the
mhm,
United States supplying the kinetic weapons.
yeah.
However, has anyone looked at the depletion of kinetic weapons like around the world? Like, as far as I understand, like Russia's having to go out and find new suppliers for things like artillery. I don't know where our supply of what we're sending to Ukraine is at, but like a lot of the stuff we were sending them is old and outdated.
Yeah.
We haven't been sending them the latest and greatest, but now they're starting to get into that realm with the newer long range platforms and weapon systems. So
Well,
that's an interesting kind of thing to throw in there as a counterbalance. Like, where are the stockpiles of the kinetic weapons, and at what
well,
point is it
well,
a critical
the,
problem?
the thing is, military weapon systems have evolved so much in the last 50 years where you don't necessarily need as many kinetic weapons as you did back in the day because we're so much better at doing targeted strikes, right? Where back in the day you'd have something like carpet bombing, now you have a precision strike from a drone. So you don't necessarily need as much high levels of ammunition that you did in the past to
Well, that's a
fight a
great point.
giant
Is
kinetic
an
war.
advantage of who
Yeah.
wins, right? Because
Yeah.
Russia
Yeah.
doesn't have that capability. Like Russia is literally fucking, you know,
They
send it,
have it, but
send it, bro.
it's
They're not
yeah.
doing. They don't have the capabilities that we have, and
Yeah.
because if they did, it would be the Ukraine forces that be getting the shit kicked out of them, not the Russian forces.
Their biggest problem is that they have so much military hardware from the Soviet era that they don't know what to, they don't necessarily, back in the day, they used to just literally make shit, export it out, you know, all these countries would have it. They're trying to utilize weapon systems that were developed in the 70s and 80s and make that like, you know, part of their military strategy, in which case, that's why if you look at all these tanks, right, the T-72 tanks, poorly designed tanks that literally are getting ripped apart by an $80,000 missile. Literally, you have $80,000 missile ripping up a tank that's like $2 million. So think about the costs, right? So one of the things in terms of military doctrine, you don't need to have a very expensive system to defeat a more, but what you do need is high quality data and intelligence so that you can make the most effective use of the stuff that you have. Like right now with the Ukrainians, if Palantir is doing such a good job in terms of providing them the intelligence, which I suspect they are, that is actually one of the biggest one of the biggest value propositions for Palantir, right? Because this is the greatest this is going to sound like war, like a war profiteering kind of like conversation.
You won't say anything that Alex Karp hasn't already said.
But this is the greatest demonstration of software software that you could have possibly asked for, because now you're not fighting, literally you don't get to showcase your software defeating an enemy every day, right? There aren't just wars happening, especially someone as large as Russia, right? Before it was like, oh yeah, we have the software that can help you find terrorists and kill terrorists. Okay, that's great. But guess what? Now every country is always worried about the next door neighbor being a large.
If Ukraine could do it, if it literally was the difference and why Ukraine is still standing, like that's why I said every NATO country will be begging for that software, because as the threat of conflict grows, like having that force multiplier, it's like Alex Karp would say, it's like the difference of one side having, a gun and the other side having an atomic bomb, Yeah. And he's really, I mean, if the war is demonstrating that actually is true, then yeah, I mean, that's going to be essential in a time when we're looking at potentially another world war,
Yeah.
I'm happy.
No one wants to see that. I mean, no one wants to see that. But I think that a lot of that isn't factored into Palantir, and a lot of people are kind of assuming the kind of stability we've had over the last 20 years is just going to be forever, and it's obviously not. So
I'm happy we expanded on that discussion, because the last 30 minutes really explained why a NATO company, just from an intelligence perspective, a NATO country would want Palantir.
Yeah. And remember, all the NATO countries are boosting their spending in defense, right? So right now, if they're getting reports that Palantir is one of the reasons why, they're not going to just spend money on buying new planes and tanks. They're also going to be buying software to support all those tanks and planes and intelligence personnel.
Especially if it makes your inventory of kinetic weapons last longer. So I think that's the big thing. That's why I brought up that point of what is the rate at which these things are being depleted, because it's really hard. You ever heard that old saying, you can have guns and you can have butter, but you can't have both? It's like guns or butter, but you can't have both. It's because it costs a lot of money to manufacture these things. If your economy's in the toilet because of war and energy shortages and everything else that are a result of the war, you got to pick between can the people eat, or are we going to have tanks on the battlefield? And so having the most efficient system that can actually apply those weapons where they're needed most could be the difference in the end between winning and losing.
Oh man, someone said something very interesting: war as a service.
Lost. Plenty of people out there that do watch.
Yeah, for sure. That reminds me of Metal Gear Solid, right? Where people just have proxy people just fighting each other, and that's it.
That's my next T-shirt is WAS. That's gonna be
awesome. War as a service.
Not gonna be Snowflake is dog shit pussy. But...
No.
That's still. Oh, by the way, I'm gonna show you guys something. Hold on. Check it out.
What's it say? Make Palantir great again. I love it, dude. Yes. That's
my wife came and she's like, "Is that a Trump hat?" No.
You ordered that specially just to wear it, Kurt?
Yeah, I'm gonna put it on when I buy Palantir again. Be like, make Palantir great again.
You're gonna have to come out with a speech on Palantir Weekly, dude. Just like,
Yeah.
do your best, Trump. Get the suit. Do the whole the whole thing. Be classic,
Palantir
man.
is now $4. I have decided it is a reasonable bet to buy them.
$4. Oh my god. Oh, I can't comment. I'm bound. I don't want to get in trouble with the SEC
All right.
or FTC or whatever the fuck.
Yeah. All right, guys. This was fun. Always a pleasure, Coach Strap. You know.
Oh yeah, man. Oh
Thanks
yeah.
for educating us.
Someone asked what price did I sell it at? $10 because I ended up getting a premium. So $10. I sold Palantir at $10. I had a bunch of puts that I wish I had kept around, but you know, you win, you lose, whatever.
I love the company, man. Like and I don't want people to think like, oh, I come out, I'm just bashing them or whatever, or bashing Carp or whatever. Like, no, it's just I love the company. I love the software. I actually believe the software could make us a more competitive country. Like if every company in the United States had Palantir, we would overnight, like in a large way, start putting a lot of other countries just to shame. It can make like that whole thing about like, oh, it's making Ukraine that much better at fighting a war. Well, think how much better it can make companies at manufacturing shit, and like delivering services. Data is gold. We know this. This is how FANG companies became ultra successful. So like, what pisses me off is like, I want more people to have the software so our country can actually grow its economy and realize the benefits of that. That's not bullshit. Like, I really do believe the software is that powerful. It's just, man, only having a couple hundred companies have it at their disposal is maddening. It's like, why doesn't everyone have it? And so that's where my source of frustration comes from. It's like, why isn't this in the hands of everyone?
Yeah, and contrary to popular belief, I don't hate Alex Karp. Believe it or not, I believe in his vision more than most people. And being former military, dude, I want our warfighters to have the best software, best technology platforms out there to safeguard our ideals. Like, at the end of the day, I'm always going to be for that. But I also have the hat of an investor, and I want to make sure that when I do put capital out there, that it's going to show me a return. Because at the end of the day, I have a family. I have a family to feed. I have to, do things with it, right? So everyone's investment decisions are there. So it's not that I don't like the company. I don't like Alex Karp. I don't like Alex Karp's vision. I just have trouble finding, like, pretty much figuring out a way how they're going to be able to develop their business so that me as an investor, I see the return from it also.
Absolutely.
That's all.
Especially well, I can't comment on this stuff, but yes, I agree with that 100%. And I think that that's the right way to look at your investments, man. It's a deeply, that first question you asked them, it's a deeply personal decision. And it comes down to those factors, So, yeah. And what's cool is we can sit around and then we can, debate about what the hell they're doing. Like, what are they doing? Like, does it make any sense whatsoever? Why,
the reason I asked you that question in particular is because Chris bought Snowflake with that money. So that's
dude. Snowflake, I'm sorry.
Well, I can talk about Snowflake all day. Like the fact that okay, it's what is their revenue multiple now? Because back in the day it was 60 or 80 times revenue was their multiple. What is it now?
It's 30, and Palantir's at a 10 times trailing 12-month.
12-month.
Yeah,
So
but
three
remember,
times Snowflake is 3 times what Palantir is, right?
Yeah, but Snowflake is growing 4 times as fast as Palantir.
Yeah, but you have to bet that they're actually executing, delivering good product that's being developed at a super rapid pace, right? So all the new features that are making the lake house, right? The lake house, all these things that under one roof that is both the data warehouse and then all of the machine learning tools and all of the new
marketplace,
data application tools, marketplace. Are those being executed with A+ quality? Because Palantir got to develop that shit over the period of 12 years, and it's definitely A+ in my opinion. I haven't used all those features from Snowflake, but my guess is that when product gets over its skis and overextended, you start getting a lot of subpar product being delivered. And the CEO has a vision, but at the same time, they're still fundamentally a columnar database. That's primarily what the product is. That's their core, right?
Yeah.
The columnar database is not 3 times Palantir's TAM. Sorry, it's fucking tiny, and it's way overinflated, and it could be.
And everyone's got one. Everyone's got one,
and it could be one of those things where the shrewd investors are making a shit ton of money off Snowflake, but the people who got in later are going to get screwed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Warren Buffett like $250 million off of it.
Oh, sure he did. Yeah. Who's it? Sachin said you can't invest like Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett goes into a company, he negotiates fucking contracts, all this shit. Warren Buffett's going to make money no matter what.
Nah,
That's the
but
advantage of being
Buffett
a-
got in at Buffett got in at IPO price, which he never does. Buffett never goes in, but I think it's more like some of his new people that are more like open to investing in non-traditional things that Buffett is known to invest in.
Yeah.
You know, so I think the name is Ajit Jain and this other person, I forgot their name, but they see the value in Snowflake because of their insurance product that they had that was using Snowflake, and that's
Yep.
kind of like was the in for Berkshire into saying,
Yep.
oh wow, this is a very this is an amazing platform that has huge growth potentials. The thing that really stuck out to me is that even when Snowflake went to $400 a share, Berkshire didn't sell, right? They literally kept it, like even with like
That might have been a bad
multiples being so
decision.
high.
Future
That would
hasn't
have
been
been,
written
yeah,
yet.
yeah.
We don't know if that was a good decision or a bad decision.
Real quick, last question, CodeStrap. Do you know if Baidu, Alibaba, or Tencent have any SaaS stuff similar to AWS or? I know they have SaaS stuff similar to like Alibaba has its own cloud.
It has its own cloud. Yeah, it's its own
Yeah.
cloud provider. Very
Yeah.
similar to AWS for sure. I don't know about Tencent or Baidu, but yeah, Alibaba is an interesting investment. They're like the most innovative, company in China. So like they're doing some incredible stuff. But when Jack Ma is the CEO, I believe.
Yep.
Was the CEO.
Was
Yeah.
what is it? Re-educated by the Communist Party. I think that was a huge. You can't get rid of people like that.
No.
You're just not going to recover. And I think that was a leading indicator of where China's economy is going and why. But it's also why it makes them dangerous. So
Yeah.
like,
Xi
take an innovator
Jinping
like
is
that and
yeah.
destroy
Xi,
them.
Jin- Xi Jinping is a straight totalitarian. Like this new 5-year
100%.
Congress is coming up. They're only allowed 2 terms. He's like, nah, those are the old rules. This dude is going to be dictator for life, just like Putin. Putin, if you look at the Constitution of Russia, he just kept wearing a different hat every time. And now he's just, how long has been Putin in power? Since what, 1997 when Yeltsin was out?
Yep.
20 something years, dude. Now you got Xi Jinping. He's gonna be there forever, man.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of got to deal with the way the world is, and like that's just the reality of it. But my point with Alibaba is it just you can't replace a visionary like Jack Ma. Like it's gonna implode. The whole reason Alibaba was what it was is because of him.
Yeah.
So like, but the CCP, and I see this in Western companies a lot too. It's like they'll get rid of a top person because someone doesn't like their political views or whatever. And I'm like, okay, so like you got this person over here is making $20 an hour, and you're firing this person over here who makes $2 million a year and is integral to your company's success. That doesn't make any fucking sense. Like where's the calculus here? Like who's delivering? You guys know about the 80-20 rule, right? Like who's delivering the value? How many of those 20% can you fire or get rid of and still expect your company to perform? And that's where the CCP always miscalculates. Is like they think you're just widgets. You're not just widgets, right?
Yeah.
People are different. People have different skills. There's 5 fucking Jack Ma's. We can probably count them on one hand who have impacted our lives in the last 100 years, right? But like the CCP could just take someone like that and completely, essentially execute them and think that the company will be just fine.
Yeah.
It's not going to be fine. That shit's going to fucking fall down, man.
It kills innovation. It kills innovation and the spirit of innovation where you don't. So the other thing with China is also is that you're not allowed to fail. So people just pretend to succeed. Right. And so if you look at so many of their projects, they're like, oh my God, we've done this. We've done that. We're growing at this level. And when you really look at it, it's literally just a bunch of wax, right?
That's
where literally a little bit of sun.
It's fungible, right? So like,
yeah,
you can make the data say whatever you want the data to say. You can tell it whatever story you want to tell with it.
That's why they're in this economic crisis that they are right now, right? With all the building and everything else, like
exactly why
the way that they grow is that they tell you what you're going to grow at, and you grow at that level.
The current real estate crisis was driven by a system of payouts,
Yeah,
and that's why they're in the position they're in. It's corruption, right? So like,
massive corruption.
I'm not saying that's unique to China. I mean, corruption happens. It's just the way it kind of works. But what's different in China is that we don't go out and kneecap Steve Jobs, like literally. Like we're not going to go out there and put him in a re-education camp and then destroy his mind, and then, you can never run Apple again. like we might pass a law or push some regulation onto a company that seems, you know, too intrusive or whatever, but we let our innovators innovate, you know. And I think that if there's one thing where I would align and say, like, I want to conserve something, it's like I want to conserve the America that lets the innovator in their garage contribute to society. I don't want to grow up in a country where the only people that can innovate and the only people that can succeed are people who are already successful. Because we're cutting off the thing that built America, which is like the innovation platform. You know, like we are an innovation platform, man. Like in surfing, there's this company Quicksilver. They started out making board shorts, like surfing trunks, and selling them in their garage. Now they're a publicly traded company. You know, that story played out over and over again in the surf industry of guys who were just wanted to create a product, sell it, and market it. You know, and they were able to do that.
But
And it
it's
works
also
for a lot of
in the
people as well.
context of innovation, it's also the venture capital system we have in America. Like
Yep.
venture capitalists will raise $5 billion, give all of it to startups, have 99% of them fail just for the potential for all of those 99% to go chase their dream, and then one of them hopefully returns. And that only happens in America in the way that it does. Like,
But that's a fragile thing. Like people take that for granted. It only takes one law to kill that system.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
And remember, government has the guns. You do not. Like, yeah, we have a Second Amendment, but at the end of the day, like the government's got the guns. And that means like they have complete control over the financial system. They can lock every bank down. They can lock every bank transaction down. They have control over SWIFT. You're not transferring money anywhere. Like they have complete control over those things. And so, yeah, we should have more of an adversarial relationship with government, in my opinion. Like free marketeers, venture capitalists. You never assume government's your friend. You know, like at the end of the day,
I don't understand this, Coach Shrep. You don't sound like a person from California. Like everything you just said is like anti-California, man.
Well, dude, I've lived all over the world, man. Like
California,
I was raised in California, but I've lived all over the world. So like,
yeah,
you know, I've seen lots of different countries and all that shit. So yeah. So I survived Central America for 7 years, which was pretty cool. I'll tell you about the experiences I've had down there. But yeah.
You are a very interesting person, dude. Very interesting. Yeah. A few more drinks in, and we'll hear all your stories of South America.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
So I lived in Nicaragua for like 6 months. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to see what the Sandinistas did to that country. Pretty fucking crazy.
Ouch.
Yeah, Sandinistas really worked that fucking country over pretty hardcore. I lived in Costa Rica for like 7 years, which was really cool. My daughter was born there, but what you see are like failed governments. Like what happens when you have like essentially one party rule and the political machine is so entrenched that you can't even get a cell phone provider into that country that could improve people's lives, you know? Yeah. That kind of shit is real. It's like the normal de facto, like everywhere else in the world, there is no free market. There are oligarchs and there are people with power and 90% of the people don't have it, you know?
Like we have 8.5% inflation. Turkey has 80% inflation right now.
Isn't that nutty? Isn't that crazy? Like to think. Do you know in Costa Rica the average loan price is 20% interest rate? Right?
Oh, gosh.
Isn't that nuts? 20 fucking percent. You're at the bank, you're gonna loan 20% interest. It's like fucking credit card loan.
That's like loan shark status, man.
Isn't that nutty?
Yeah.
Like, and that was a good deal. It's like, oh, and you got the loan in U.S. dollars.
That's because
it was lower because you got it in dollars. It's like 20% instead of like 50%. It's fucking nuts, man. You know, we take a lot of that shit for granted, but I think if you've lived in other countries and you've seen how other countries operate, like you realize how fragile what we have here is, and like there's nothing preventing that going away here. I think the only thing that prevents it is an informed populace who knows what they're talking about and can push back on people who are intent on breaking that, you know. But it has nothing to do with like the political debate. That's where I think like things have gone off the rails. Is like people are too much in the red versus blue camp, and we should be in like the us versus them camp. You know, like, I don't fucking care what political party you are. You are not anointed. You are not a politician. You are not a government employee. You have no power. We're all in the same boat, motherfucker. We are all powerless. Like, do you think you're out there powerful because you're a Democrat or a Republican? You're fucking stupid. Like, you have no power. Like, it should be the us versus them camp is the way I see it. Like, and literally, we should always be fearful of people with guns. You know, and like what I mean by that is like not owning a gun. What I'm talking about is like a government that can direct people to arrest you and imprison you at force, you know, with force. Be skeptical of that. You know?
I mean, even the Brittany Griner situation in Russia, man, it's insane.
Yep.
It's like there's like obviously they're doing it because we're in the middle of a heated war, and they just put her in jail for the next 9 years. She's there because she had a little bit of
Isn't
weed
that
on.
nuts? Yeah, it's nuts. But like, I mean, this is the shit that happens in most other countries. Like the U.S. is unique in this regard. Like having traveled a lot and seen how people are treated. Like in my early teens and 20s, I used to go to Indonesia all the time. You know. And you could see like how the police force would work there because we were always getting in fucking trouble, like doing stupid shit that you're not supposed to do, no matter where you go. You know, like because we were young guys, like surfing and partying. But like you could the police there don't fuck around, man. And you have no rights. You have zero rights.
If you go outside the U.S., every country that you go to, and anyone that says, "Oh, I hate America," like America's this, America's that, you ask them, "Oh, do you want a visa to come to America?" Hell yeah! I want to come to America.
Dude, in Indonesia, I would walk over the homeless people, like, because people would go to Kuta Beach in Bali to sell wares, and like they come from a lot of surrounding villages, but they didn't have anywhere to stay, and they would just sleep on the streets, and you're like walking over people, going home or whatever, like people don't have money, man. Like people are starving to death in a lot of cases, or like just trying to get through the fucking week, And like there, you're born into your life. Like your village makes wood carvings. That's what you're gonna do. You're gonna make wood carvings. That's your fucking job, dude.
To even have the concept of chasing a dream is such an American
It's such an American ideal, and it can't fade from the world. Like it has to stay. But the only way that's gonna stay is to have a generation of people around who believe in it. Which is, dude, admit like 100%, dude. High five on you carrying on that tradition. Like that's it's got to be, dude. It's got to be young people.
Well, that's why I resonate so much with this. Obviously, people know that I have a startup, and like it's the idea of knowing, as you said in the beginning, 99% of technology startups fail, but still having the capacity to try, to want to take the risk, to potentially fail in public, and to have investors like Chris that were like, let's see if he has a shot. I mean, like that doesn't happen in every other country.
It doesn't happen anywhere. I mean, you're not allowed to get private investment in a lot of places, so it just doesn't happen. But it's also about having like people with the mindset that they're going to go out and do it.
CODESTRAP, this is the dude that wrote on Twitter, "I wish I didn't have to pee so much so I could keep working." I'm like, bro, I am ready to profit off of your labor.
No, what I said, CODESTRAP, what I said is every time I sit down.
This is what I miss when I'm on Twitter. This is awesome,
bro. No, this is the last.
I'm not on Twitter, so like I don't get to see this.
You gotta let me know if you have this problem. I sit down to work. I'm like, all right, it's time to work.
Look at this,
and I have to pee. And I'm like, why does this? So the tweet was every time I sit down.
Your prostate checked out, man.
The exact tweet was every time I sit down to seriously work and I have to pee within the first 5 seconds, I want to chop off my penis.
And that's not the right solution, man.
This is his. Imagine this is the CEO, bro. This is how hard he is willing to wear a diaper so he can keep working, bro. That is who I want to put my cap. You think Carp does that? You think Carp's like, man, I really wish I could, if I had to pee, or should I decide on keep working? Nah, dude. Ahmed Kukreja, this is the dude. I mean, look at how many podcasts this dude has. I don't know when he sleeps. I really don't. So I'm investing in Ahmed. I'm not investing in Audia.
But even that, I think that goes to CODESTRAP's point. It's like the idea that in America we could have private people look at like. The world doesn't know who I am, but Chris knows who I am. Because I developed a relationship with Chris. And Chris is like, I think this guy might fail, might succeed, but I want to take a chance with my capital. And that is the prerequisite to building a $1 billion company. Like someone has to believe in you because you believe in yourself.
And be given the freedom to make that choice.
That choice.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, for example, real quick, we have I use the crowdfund for the startup, and we use a platform called WeFunder. Canada banned WeFunder because Canada doesn't want to let their non-accredited investors make decisions with $1,000 or $2,000. So there were so many Canadian investors that were just like pissed off because their government was like, hey, we don't want you investing. We want to control where your capital goes.
Yep. Let me respond to something in the comments too, by the way. I'm not saying there aren't other great places to live. I lived in Costa Rica for 7 years because it's a great place to live. Like I fucking loved it. Like it's not to say that. What I'm saying is that there are political systems and financial systems that only exist in certain places in the West, period. End of fucking story. That's not debatable.
Yes.
And we don't want to lose those, and all of the things that make America unique and England unique and France and Spain and Portugal and all these countries, if you lose that, it's not going to be the same world that you know today, you know. And it's we need to have more of an appreciation for what makes those things unique. And that's not to say there aren't other wonderful countries. Like I said, I spent most of my life fucking traveling to other countries. I fucking love going to other places, and I've spent a lot of my time there. My daughter was born in another country, right? Like that's not that you're misunderstanding what's being said. What's being said is that like the idea that people can have private property and make investments, and there's a free market, and that there could be people as powerful as the government that threaten it and they can't be executed or otherwise imprisoned. That doesn't exist in a lot of other countries. And by the way, like free speech, that doesn't exist in Canada. That doesn't exist in England. Do you know what the fuck is going on right now? You know, people are being put in jail for exercising speech in those countries. Like, so don't think that America is not unique in this regard. It's very unique in this regard. So like the world needs America. The world needs the West and these weird ideas. You know, like the whole Enlightenment value thing has often been described as weird, right? Like it's very non-intuitive. And there's a reason for that, you know. But if you lose it, I really shudder to think like what civilization looks like, you know, 200
when you lose
years
optimism in a civilization, I mean that's rough. That's tough.
It's not just optimism. I think it's just like constraints, you know, like when you have a balance between people and the government, I think things tend to be better. Where government has to be a partner in what the people are doing in order to have a successful kind of like society, versus like the opposite, which is where it doesn't matter how much the people suffer, the government will always endure and survive. And I think that what the West tried to introduce was a different way of living, because like up until then, there was this concept of like the stationary bandit as sort of the first idea, which is like the idea that like, oh, the one bandit who figured out I don't need to go roam around and like rob all these people. I just like set up my kingdom and they'll pay me taxes. Like that was kind of the stationary bandit model, and that kind of worked for a very long time throughout human history. But the West kind of figured out a different model, you know, which was let's have a partnership between the people and the government, and let's like actually try and balance these things, because there are concerns. You know,
democracy, because if we vote for these people, theoretically they are representing us, which means the balance.
Oh yeah. Well, it's the government can get carried away in its ambitions, right? Because like you give people power and they're going to want more power, and they will use that power to insulate themselves from accountability and all these things. Yeah. But then people, on the other hand, are interesting because they can thrive and they can create economic systems, and they can do these beautiful things like create art and reason about things and solve real problems that if you just empower a handful of people, we won't send rockets to the moon. We won't fucking have semiconductors. We won't have all these wonderful things that were the result of free and open inquiry, because the government would shut it down. You know, that's history. Just go read about it. Like that's history. And so like what's beautiful about the West is I think we found a way to try and strike a balance between those things and not let the government try and get carried away on one end and the people suffer on the other end. And we can debate about like where the right balance is. I think that's wonderful. But what I don't like is when people start talking like absolutists, or that like, you know, authoritarians, that like, you know, this it's going to be this way or fucking no way, man. Because the only way you get to that, like this way or no way, is you empower a strong central government to make that decision. And once that happens, it's over.
You know, it's funny. A lot of this was written a long time ago by philosophers like Socrates, right? Like, and Roman Republic, and Republic, right? So you can see if you have just a simple majority doing things, you also have a lot of the consequences that come from that, right? So you have to balance. How do you balance, like, what was the quote? Like, democracy is like the wolf deciding on which sheep to eat or something like that. I forgot the exact quote, right? So that's
I love
what
it. That's the quickest path to tyranny, you know.
Yeah, and it's so weird because, and it's funny because people forget that there have been democracies in the past that have turned into tyrannies very easily. Like the Russian Constitution is technically a democracy, but you have a tyrannical dictator. Man. The Chinese,
India's representative of India was pointing that out earlier this week on a news program. Like, hey, it's a democracy, man. It's
like you look at Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler came to power within the system. He was democratically elected. So it just goes to show you that there have to be some checks and balances. And I think the U.S. has done probably the best job of preventing too much dictatorial power being concentrated in one what's the word? One branch of the government. That's been
Or
our
just
basic thing.
limited set of hands or something. Yeah, you
Yeah.
know, we've done an okay job. I think we've regressed in certain areas, but
Yeah.
it's a new experiment, right? Like so, like this has all been going on for a very short amount of time. We're going to see how this all nets out in the long run, I guess. But I think that what's interesting, what I love being the shareholder in Palantir is that I'm at like the nexus of those things. So it's like, I love that, you know, as much as I kind of was talking some shit on Carp tonight, like I do love Alex Carp. Like I love that there's like a CEO out there that like inspires me on that level to have these kind of discussions. I cannot for the life of me figure out how he supports Hegel and is like a progressive, because it's like, dude, like
That's always been a mystery.
read Popper's critique of Hegel. Like it literally lays out the foundation for Hitler's platform, you know, like, so it's like creating these strong centralized systems of government, as much as you may think that the state is the ultimate utopia, at the end of the day, you're talking about a very small amount of people holding tremendous power. And like, no matter what way you slice it, that's always going to be where you end up. And if you have the wrong view of human nature, right, like that's disastrous. If you have the wrong view of human nature, if you believe that humans are not going to abuse that system, and you believe they're inherently good, and what is it, like John Locke, lovable Locke versus horrible Hobbes, right? You have these like different views of human nature. Well, if you have the wrong view of human nature, like those systems are doomed to absolute failure every time. And what's interesting though is that you have a CEO that you could have a conversation about that with, or that, like, yeah, and it actually has real world implications because he's dealing with governments and warfare and all these. Wonderfully fascinating company, you know, and they have these. I'm sure they have these debates internally. I'm sure it's part of their
Teal
culture.
and Carp.
Oh yeah, isn't that great? Like you could have two people. So I completely. It could be a model for how we could all get along on Twitter. You know, if Carp and fucking Teal can get along, like why can't people get along on Twitter? You know, it's like
you missed Chris's feet pics.
You have feet pics on Twitter.
4 of those, Chris.
I was just relaxed. I was in Florida this weekend, and I was just relaxing, and I just like I took a quick picture like with the sky in the background, and my feet happened to be in the picture. That wasn't the point of the picture. The point was I'm relaxing, chilling. Classic. Everyone should enjoy. You know, that's all. The quote, by the way, was democracy is 2 wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch.
Right. You know, this guy Randy Barnett, he wrote a book called Our Republican Constitution, but he pointed out that a lot of people use democracy as a stand-in for the word good. Oh God!
Don't look at my hairy
ass. Come on, put those things away.
That's a great one.
So
what's the point of life without the feet?
I'm not on
That's
there.
what it should have said. Without the feet.
That's classic.
My first thing, free feet pics. I'm in.
This guy, man. This guy.
Classic. So yeah, Randy Barnett, he wrote this book called Our Republican Constitution. But you know, I think that at the end of the day, like people are they use democracy as a stand-in for good, and that's not good. I mean, there are plenty of countries that are democracies. Doesn't mean they're have a wonderful system of government.
Yep.
And when you hear the term democracy thrown around, like no one thinks about the bad parts of democracy. Like, by the way, like, do you think Jim Crow laws were supported by democratic institutions or not? They absolutely were supported by democratic institutions run by fucking bigots. You know, so like the democracy is not a stand-in for the word good, and that's where we need to challenge ourselves. Like, is to understand like it's not all about the will of the people, right? Like, did you guys know that senators used to be appointed by governors? They weren't popularly elected.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Do you know why that was the case?
Because it was more efficient for a governor to just pick a senator?
No, because it represented states' interests. That's why we have a Senate and a House. There's the will of the people and the will of the states. Right?
Yeah.
The fact you don't know that scares me. But like,
no, I mean, I know the reasoning behind it. Like with the what's that thing called? The Constitution. Why that's important, because you don't necessarily want the majority just voting for certain things that, you know, another state made. And it was a compromise, right? I forgot what I keep forgetting right now what the exact thing was. But yeah, it was a compromise between states' rights versus federal rights, right? Where the federal government could just legislate and dictate, and the states would just have to go with it. So even like right now with the abortion debate that's out there, the debate isn't necessarily should we have the right, should people have the right to have an abortion or not. It's whether the states get to make the rules on whether people can have the abort. That's what the argument was eventually heard with the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said no, it's the states' right to make that judgment, not the federal government's right. If the federal government wants to do it and they want to enact the law, they need to go through the process of actually having an amendment go through the Constitution and codify that into law, saying that across these lands. That's why you have the slavery, right? Where slavery was abolished because it was done on a federal level. So no state, right? Even if your state right now has laws allowing you to have slaves, it gets completely muted out. Because
you're talking about incorporation. Like incorporation of the Bill of Rights happened, I think it was the 14th Amendment. But like the point I was trying to make there is like Randy Barnett wrote this book and he was like, the Constitution as written is a better form of government than the one we actually have. And our form of government has gone through numerous iterations, not the least of which have been Supreme Court ruling after Supreme Court ruling that forms this other branch of government that isn't accounted for. But like the point I was trying to make with why we're senators appointed by governors was because there needed to be a balance between the will of the people and the will of the state. And that is very important to preserve that. And when you get too much democracy, you get a lot of stupidity. And like turning the Senate into also the people's house was probably one of the worst decisions our country has ever made, and not being able to balance state interests with the will of the popular. And by the way, like, why do we have an electoral college? Like, we have an electoral college because we have gazillion states in this. We have 50 fucking states in this country, over 300 million people. And we need to make sure that Idaho and South Dakota are actually represented on the same level as California and New York. Now, you want to tear that republic apart, that's on you, but that could lead to civil war. Like, there's an old saying, aim for peace, not being right. Like, that's why we have an electoral college, is like to aim for peace, not being right. So like there are all these things that like come into play when you're designing a system of government that are required for you to think about, and that guys, almost 300 years ago had a better knowledge of and actually were critically thinking about compared to Twitter, And I think a lot of people should go back and start reading Montesquieu and reading like the original philosophies that informed our founders, so they can actually have an informed opinion about like why we're here. How did we get here? Why did we get here? But if we don't, if we're going to be fucking morons about it and start like, retweeting everyone's posts, we're going to lose it. It's going to go away because it's going to be the quickest path to tyranny, which is, I had a koozie. I don't know where it's at, but I still probably have it somewhere. It says, never underestimate the power of stupid people in large groups.
Do you have a few minutes, Coach Strap? I'm just going to show you guys a video real quick that,
sure.
Yeah.
As long as it's not another fucking video game.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Because the audience got pissed on that last one.
No.
Happy to be back in front of the Judiciary Committee where I started this pilgrimage. I am going to get even more fundamental than my good friend and colleague. Like him, I speak to students, especially law students, but also college students and even high school students, quite frequently about the Constitution, because I feel that we're not teaching it very well. I speak to law students from the best law schools, people presumably especially interested in the law, and I ask them, how many of you have read the Federalist Papers? And well, a lot of hands will go out. No, not just number 48 and the big ones. How many of you have read the Federalist Papers, cover to cover? Never more than about 5%. And that is very sad. I mean, especially if you're interested in the Constitution. Here's a document that says what the framers of it thought they were doing. It's such a profound exposition of political science that it is studied in political science courses in Europe. And yet we have raised a generation of Americans who are not familiar with it. So when I speak to these groups, The first point I make, and I think it's even a little more fundamental than the one that Stephen has just put forward. I asked them, what do you think is the reason that America is such a free country? What is it in our Constitution that makes us what we are? And I guarantee you that the response I will get, and you will get this from almost any American, including the woman that he was talking to at the supermarket, the answer would be freedom of speech, freedom of the press, no unreasonable searches and seizures, no quartering of troops in home, those marvelous provisions of the Bill of Rights. But then I tell them, if you think that a Bill of Rights is what sets us apart, you're crazy. Every banana republic in the world has a Bill of Rights. Every president for life has a Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights of the former evil empire, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, was much better than ours. I mean it literally. It was much better. We guarantee freedom of speech and of the press. Big deal. They guaranteed freedom of the speech, of the press, of street demonstrations and protests, and anyone who is caught trying to suppress criticism of the government will be called to account. Whoa, that is wonderful stuff. Of course, just words on paper. What our framers would have called a parchment guarantee. And the reason is that the real constitution of the Soviet Union, you think of the word constitution, it doesn't mean a bill, it means structure. Say a person has a sound constitution, has a sound structure. The real constitution of the Soviet Union, which is what our framers debated that whole summer in Philadelphia in 1787. They didn't talk about the Bill of Rights. That was an afterthought, wasn't it? That constitution of the Soviet Union did not prevent the centralization of power in one person or in one party. And when that happens, the game is over. The Bill of Rights is just what our framers would call a parchment guarantee. So the real key to
Can you pause it there?
the distinctiveness of America.
So that point on single party rule is 100% correct, right? Like, and that's the thing, like living in other countries where I got to be very familiar with the effects of that is like, once you have a single party system, once you have no real robust political debate happening, that's when all those things that he's talking about in there, all the you could have as many guarantees in the Constitution as you want, it's not going to matter, you know. And we should really look at that. Like, I live in California, right? And that is a one party state. There is no robust debate that happens, none of that. And I can see those same dynamics that I would see happening in corrupt countries happening here, which is like, we're not going to listen to the courts. We're not going to listen to the law. We're going to do what we want to do because we're California and we're awesome. We have the moral authority to do what we want to do, regardless of what the law says or the rules of the republic are, right?
Yeah.
So I would say, like, the thing that is most threatening in most of these scenarios is not just the concentration of political power into one individual, but concentration of political power into a single party system. The other side of that is the populace who votes for that, right? So, like, you know, who here has heard the saying "never again," right? Like, never again. That was after World War II. Never again would we allow ourselves to commit mass genocide. Well, mass genocide has happened innumerable times since World War II. But they all have one thing in common, which is a populace intent on carrying it out. And it wasn't Adolf Hitler that caused mass genocide. It was the people who would listen to that motherfucker. It's us. The real lesson of World War II is that every genocidal maniac exists in all of us. And our willingness to listen to that crap is what's at stake. And I look to things like the Stanford prison experiments to point out to people, like, the real threat is not the Adolf Hitler, it's you, you know? And that is really where Scalia is going with this, in my opinion. It's like, we have to prevent stupidity and people's worst instincts. Because remember, we are animals closely related to primates. Did you know that primates will murder an alpha male that's perceived to be
Weak.
unjust. No, unjust.
Really?
Like, yes, 100%. Jonathan Haidt talks about this in his research. Primates will murder an alpha male that is perceived to be unjustly carrying out his role. It's kind of crazy when you think about it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, it's ingrained in us to have a sense of justice, you know. But at the same time, it's also ingrained in us to have a sense of bloodlust. And I think like we can be easily manipulated, and that's the real lesson of World War II. It's like we really have to do better as individuals to hold ourselves to higher standards, you know, and especially if you grew up in America, especially if you're growing up in the West. Do not let yourselves vote for a single party. If your political idea, I always ask my friend this one time before I got off Facebook. I was asking him on Facebook. I was like, do you vote your ideology every time? Like, do you always just vote your ideology? Does everything you say align with some party? Like, maybe it shouldn't, bro, because like every worst thing in history, that's how people were doing things, you know?
Yeah.
It's like everything you believed aligned, like 100%. Like, if you have nothing questioning this party over here, this ideology, like, that's scary, you know?
So it's kind of cool because let me just finish playing it because he actually goes into how the U.S. prevents that from happening. It's really interesting. Hold on one second.
I'm really curious how in 2022. So this is like clearly like 98 or 2000, 22 years later. If this whole
structure of our government, one part of it, of course, is the independence of the judiciary. But there's a lot more. There are very few countries in the world, for example, that have a bicameral legislature. Oh, England has a House of Lords for the time being, but the House of Lords has no substantial power. They can just make the Commons pass a bill a second time. France has a Senate, it's honorific. Italy has a Senate, it's honorific. Very few countries have two separate bodies in the legislature equally powerful. That's a lot of trouble, as you gentlemen doubtless know, to get the same language through two different bodies elected in a different fashion. Very few countries in the world have a separately elected chief executive. Sometimes I go to Europe to talk about separation of powers. And when I get there, I find that all I'm talking about is independence of the judiciary, because the Europeans don't even try to divide the two political powers, the two political branches, the legislature and the chief executive. In all of the parliamentary countries, the chief executive is the creature of the legislature. There's never any disagreement between them and the prime minister, as there is sometimes between you and the president. When there's a disagreement, they just kick him out. They have a no confidence vote, a new election, and they get a prime minister who agrees with the legislature. And, you know, the Europeans look at the system and they say, whoa, it passes one house, it doesn't pass the other house. Sometimes the other house is in the control of a different party. It passes both. And then this president who has a veto power vetoes it. And they look at this and they say, it is gridlock. And I hear Americans saying this nowadays, and there's a lot of it going around. They talk about a dysfunctional government because there's disagreement, and the framers would have said, yes, that's exactly the way we set it up. We wanted this to be power, contradicting power, because the main ill that beset us, as Hamilton said in the Federalist, when he talked about a separate Senate, he said, yes, it seems inconvenient, but inasmuch as the main ill that besets us is an excess of legislation, it won't be so bad. This is 1787. He didn't know what an excess of legislation was. So unless Americans can appreciate that and learn to love the separation of powers, which means learning to love the gridlock, which the framers believed would be the main protection of minorities, the main protection. If a bill is about to pass that really comes down hard on some minority, they think it's terribly unfair. It doesn't take much to throw a monkey wrench into this complex system. So Americans should appreciate that, and they should learn to love the gridlock. It's there for a reason, so that the legislation that gets out will be good legislation. and thus conclude.
So it's kind of
Pretty dope.
sad. Yeah,
Pretty
it's
dope.
kind of
Yeah,
it's
Scalia
kind of
was great.
sad. It's kind of sad because everything that he said is 100% right. But over the last 20 years, we've started to erode that. And the way that we started doing is confirmations, right? And then passing certain laws with just a simple
I
majority.
can give you
Yeah.
the counter argument to Scalia, but the point is like what's interesting about Palantir is it draws us into these conversations, right? Like why? Because Palantir is at the nexus of a lot of these things. They're at the nexus of civil liberties, of war, of empowering governments. It's pretty crazy when you think about it.
That's why it's such an interesting company to cover. Because I did debate in high school.
Right.
I was a national debater, and literally I had
It's like the moment you launch a Palantir channel, you're gonna be in the intersection of all these things.
of all these debates.
So
Isn't that cool?
I'm gonna blow your minds right now. Do you know who Antonin Scalia's grandson is?
No,
Because
I don't.
he works for Palantir in
No
policy.
way. No way. That's epic.
I'll put it up right now.
That's epic. That's classic. Man.
Wow.
So, like, what's interesting about Palantir is, like, I guarantee you they have town hall meetings where they talk about these things, you know, where especially in the context of civil liberties, privacy protections, all these kind of things.
There you go. Antonin Scalia, policy strategist, hired in April.
Whoa, have we established he's actually related to Scalia?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I
All
did.
right,
I
we
trust
have to
me.
show me the evidence, brother. I'm not gonna believe you just because you say it's true. So that's pretty classic.
Hold on, I'll find it for you.
I can hear the typing in the background.
You got Jill in your DMs talking about you could develop your skills. Like she wants.
Oh, you better hide those DMs, bro.
She wants to talk to you, bro.
Hide
You
your
got a wife,
DMs,
Chris. You can't have Jill trying to
God.
upsell you on anything.
Nah, hold on 1 second.
LinkedIn sales are the worst, bro. It's just like
They are. Like,
It's so
seriously. You know what's funny? I always think about LinkedIn. I'm like, when did LinkedIn devolve into a strictly sales platform? Like
Oh,
I mean, it
you
used
only
to
get
be kind of
1.2
cool.
billion hits per month. Like
No way.
it's a big. I didn't know it got. I checked it the other day. Pinterest is at like 990 million. LinkedIn's at
That's
1.6 billion.
crazy. But I mean, granted, like huge success for the strategy crew over there. Like great job, but like at the same time, like my experience is being degraded. Like using the platform, I'm really kind of getting over it. I'm just like, do I even want to go back on there and check it out? Like I know a lot of people don't check it regularly, but I actually use the platform pretty regularly because I'm trying to like promote certain technology or whatever. But all the sales stuff's getting in the way. It's like everything is sales now.
Do you ever see yourself clicking on like a B2B ad on that platform?
And never. The one thing I'm looking for are posts.
Ads last year.
I'm just looking for posts from the people I follow, pretty much. You know, like seeing what they're working on, and then trying to promote like those posts and be like, oh, this is a cool thing that they discovered or whatever. But now it's like there's 50,000 ads in the middle of all that, and then they give them the ability to like direct message you. So now I get like. And now I'm like, oh, I'm just going to turn off notifications from LinkedIn because it's like I don't want any more notifications from this platform because they're constantly bombarding me with like all this crap. It's kind of crazy, you know. Well, guys, epic pod. We got into a lot of cool stuff tonight.
It was 2 hours, man. I can't believe 150 people are still here at 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Fuck
This was good.
I fucking loved it. You know, I love to talk about things like this. I love how like Palantir puts us in the center of all these kind of like conversations been going all these different ways. But like honestly, really that's the coolest thing about this community, you know? And like and the fact that like Palantir is right in the center of all this. It's kind of crazy. What are we looking at?
You guys see this? This was his obituary when well not obituary, but basically when the article. So his grandson, Antonin Scalia, whose name is Nino, led the funeral procession. So how many Antonin Scalias you think that are out there right now? Whose
I'm still going to demand DNA evidence. I want DNA evidence, motherfucker.
I'm just saying it would be the biggest coincidence that you would have a grandson named Antonin Scalia who's the same age as the Supreme Court justice, and he works in policy, right at Palantir. Imagine. Just saying.
Bruh.
Yeah. Trust me, I know there's other people that I've found on on LinkedIn that have political connections that go way high. You would be shocked. And also like Stanley Druckenmiller, right? Like his daughter works at like the giant hedge fund. His daughter works at Palantir as a forward deployed engineer. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I'm gonna jet. Epic conversation. Fucking love it. And we got to get together again. And and for anyone who hates that I swear, just remember, that's it right there.
Wow. I love it.
I get a few comments like, God, you gotta stop swearing. I'm like, man, if you knew how I grew up, you'd just know.
Yeah.
So
thank you guys for joining. We'll see you next week.
I'll see you guys next week. I'm gonna be in the doghouse. My wife came twice already, so I'll see you.
That's usually a good thing, bro.
My couch awaits.
All right, man.
All right, I'm coming.